evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the season opener of Season 2 of the NXTGEN Racing GT3 Championship. It is Season 2, of course, and today we are here for round number 1 at Daytona International Speedway, as the intro theme there suggested, and we're going to be taking a look at our second of our two lobbies today, and that is known as the CDA lobby, alternatively the Coach Dave Academy lobby in sponsorship with also Next Level Racing. So it's the CDA NLR lobby in full, but we're referring to it as CDA here due to some character constraints. But regardless, we have got an action-packed schedule for you tonight over the course of what is expected to be two fantastic races. In terms of our schedule, we'll begin underway with qualifying at 8 o'clock this evening, that is Greenwich Mean Time, i.e. GMT or UTC. We'll get underway with the 15-minute qualifying session to determine who will be on pole, and our grid order for the opening race, that will be the sprint race, which will immediately follow, and that will be a 15-minute race with no overall strategy in terms of pit stops. We're expecting all of our drivers to be full attack from start to finish until the finish line, after which we'll take a brief break. We'll be getting in some post-race interviews by our race winners, and then we'll be back at approximately 5 to 9 this evening for the 60-minute feature race. That's 60 minutes, and that is the all-important strategic race, of course, where our drivers will have that pit stop element to contend with, and we'll also have the reverse grid. In the commentary box tonight, you've got myself, of course, Paul Walsh. I'll be bringing you all the racing action. I'm also known as Britain a Spit or TX141, depending on what media you follow me on. And speaking of media, you can tune in tonight via one of 3 platforms. You have the option to tune in via the official NextGen Racing YouTube channel. That's NextGen Racing on YouTube. Alternatively, you can tune in via Facebook, that's NextGen Racing on facebook.com/groups. And last but not least, if you're inclined to tune in via Twitch, you can tune in using my personal Twitch channel, that is TX141 on Twitch. But enough about myself there, and talking a little bit more about our sponsors, about whom it'd not be possible to bring you this series, of course. This lobby being sponsored by both Coach Dave Academy and also Next Level Racing. And speaking of the two of them, let's start off by introducing Coach Dave Academy. So Coach Dave Academy, who are they, what do they stand for, and why are they relevant to iRacing? Well, they are highly relevant, very recently in fact, because Coach Dave Academy is the home of amateur and professional sim racers looking to up their game through coaching, setups and track maps. And they've recently expanded into the iRacing domain, providing setups on a regular basis, and you can imagine that Coach Dave Academy is trying to take you to the next level, whether you're looking to gain half a second or just a tenth, or just find a way to better manage the car with the appropriate setup. They're the guys to go to for all the relevant information. And if you're interested, be sure to go to CoachDaveAcademy.com today for further information. And we come from Coach Dave Academy, of course, to Next Level Racing, another sponsor and one of our senior sponsors for this lobby. And founded in 2009, Next Level Racing is the world's leading simulation brand, revolutionising simulation with its industry-leading product range, and with a clear focus on innovation and quality to meet the demanding needs of sim racers. Next Level Racing's designs and technology shall take your sim racing experience to the next level. If you want to know more about their products, be sure to head to their official website, that's nextlevelracing.com, today for more details. We're very grateful to have Next Level Racing and Coach Dave Academy with us, and they are assisting us in running this series and also providing us with a good number of prizes for our highest performing drivers and our drivers who are picked out for the other awards, such as Best Overtake, Most Improved Driver and Most Consistent Driver, and also Best Livery, so there's plenty to watch out for. And speaking of drivers, where would we be without introducing all of our drivers taking part in the Lobby 2 or the CDA lobby? And we've got 2 classes for you over the course of this season, and we will have the Pro Class drivers, consisting of approximately 20 drivers as listed here. This was accurate at the time of printing, but it can chop and change over the course of the season, of course. And we do have some returnee individuals that some of you may remember from what was Season 1, where they were not necessarily in the Pro Class, but they've either been upgraded or they've stayed in the Pro Class. One name in particular, which many of you will know, is Nigel Stock there. He'll be in the number 88 car. I believe he's bringing the Ford GT, the car that we had introduced at the expense of the BMW Z4, and Nigel Stock will be looking to do well, having been put into the Pro Class thanks to his iRating and also his overall pace in the pre-season test and also his performance in Season 1. We can also see there's some names that did arrive towards the end of Season 1 as well, such as Rick Jansen, for example, but and also Matthew Prouting, a highly anticipated driver in the number 18 car, but we've also got a plethora of new names here to introduce, such as Alistair Kirk, Chris Perry, Dan Morey, David Meakin. We've also there got Lamont Wedder, we've also got William Foyle, Stuart Taylor, you name it. We've got a whole mixture of individuals here, and also the returnee of Paul Scott as well. And some of you will know Paul Scott from the Assetto Corsa competition at GT3 series. Well, he's migrated his way over to the iRacing series as well. We look forward to seeing what Scott is able to do in the number 85 car. But going from our pros to our AMs, we've got plenty of AM drivers as well, and we've still got a couple of slots available. So if you are sat there right now saying, damn, I missed out on the opportunity to go racing this series, fear not, you can still sign up for it. Do get in touch with us at our official racing website. We'll talk more about that later on in the program, and you may be able to secure yourself a space for round number 2. But we've got returning individuals such as Darren Doherty here, I should say, Gareth Mills as well, Jack Wyborn, and we can also see there Reece Young, a driver who arrived towards the end of season 1 but put in some solid performances and will be looking to continue to improve. And we've also got a number of new names there, and one of the most highly anticipated names out of all the names here, Stefan Wessels, the number 227 driver, who in the pre-season test was showing phenomenal pace for a driver who's only recently made his way onto the iRacing simulator. And you can imagine, based on his pace, which was competitive with the Pro-Ams and the Pros that we did see in Lobby 1 earlier this week, you would imagine that Stefan Wessels will be trying to do everything he can to start off his season as strong as possible. We've also got Elwin Sykes join us, and we look forward to seeing what another member of the Sykes clan is able to do, alongside returnee Mark Sykes, of course, in number 266 car, but plenty of new names here and new faces who will be seen out on the circuit. Now, with regards to the circuit itself, it's only appropriate we now introduce the track, and that is the Daytona International Speedway Road Course. Daytona Beach, Florida, USA is our location, and consisting of 12 corners, a section of the in-course or the infield, and also the oval banks. We have those 12 wonderful corners, with turns 1 through to 6 being infield. Then we've got the long extended bank of turn 7, and then we do have the bus stop chicane of turns 8 through to 11 before the run out onto the second oval bank to complete the lap at turn number 12. This circuit map provided to us, of course, by Sim Racing Wiki, who we're forever grateful for working with them. And speaking about a reference lap, I hear you ask. Well, here is a reference lap as brought to you by Paul Scott as he takes us around then for a rather fast lap of the circuit. It's coming down to turn 1 here, bringing his BMW M4 all the way down through the gears to second gear and getting a nice tight apex there as he powers out the corner and through turn 2, the Kinker 2, and now heads up towards turn number 3, getting the car over to the left hand side before stamping on the anchors and bringing the car down to second gear, tucking it nice to the apex. In fact, coming down to first gear on the apex, and as he accelerates out now, a charge all the way up towards turn number 5, but before that he's got the left hand kink of turn number 4 to worry about. He goes through here flat out, completely attacking the apex curve and then getting ready to stamp on the brakes, and as he comes all the way down through the gears, you can see the car biting to want to get into the apex, but he's having to fight the steering wheel to keep it nice and straight as he emerges from the corner and now charges up towards turn 6. A short run up towards turn 6, and as he makes his way into the corner, then emerges back up onto the banking here. You want to get a nice early apex and attack the width of the circuit, as Scott does very nicely there, so that way you can get back up onto that banking with a huge amount of speed and continue to build it as you make your way around turn number 7. And as he continues to attack out the corner and charge all the way down towards what is turn number 8, coming up towards the bus stop chicane, of course, at this time, now the change becomes about knowing where to brake. Well, you've got to look for those markers up on the right hand side, and you'll see there's a 3, then there's a 2, and he'll be braking just before the 1 here and coming down to 4th gear. You can see the rear of the car coming round as he brings it down to 3rd through turn number 9, and then stamps back on the throttle there through 10 and 11, cutting across those apex curves, keeping a nice, smooth and straight line, trying to make it as straight as possible to get as much speed. Now, up onto the final bank into turn number 12, and just following it round here to complete the lap as he'll go up to top gear, and we're expecting our drivers under their own pace to be hitting approximately 165 to 170 miles an hour in the slipstream. We could be seeing up to 180 mile an hour being recorded today, and it's going to be interesting to see as we're grateful to Scott for bringing us that lap. And now let's take a quick look at the rules. Well, with regards to the rules, our drivers are required to run the iRacing medium downforce setup for tonight's races, with each driver having 1 fast repair available. A driver shall receive a drive-through penalty if they accumulate 17 instant points in the sprint race, I should point out. And in the feature race, meanwhile, our driver's starting fuel loads will be restricted to 70% for the start of the race. There is also a mandatory pit stop, as we mentioned earlier, and this is requiring our drivers to take on fuel, but changing tyres is entirely optional. And again, for the feature race, our drivers will have 1 fast repair available. And a driver shall receive a drive-through penalty in the feature if they accumulate 25 instant points, and if they go beyond that, of course, more stern penalties will be applied. But that's enough about the rules. Let's take take you back to the live show, and as we do clear the data off screen right now, qualifying has just kicked off, it's underway, and we will now bring you all of that qualifying action. Now, some of you may be thinking at this point, okay, well, is this a repeat or a replay, given the fact that the races were scheduled for a Wednesday? So that was, of course, Wednesday the 17th of November. You'd be right, we are post-race commentating these races, but we're going to bring you all the action as if it was live, or doing our best to bring it as close to live. I'm going to say this right now, as your commentator, I have not watched these races back at all, so I do not know who is the winner of any of the races and what happened. So for me, I'm going into completely unknown territory, as indeed our drivers were at the time. As we can see, Gaz Williams here making his way around, a pro driver, a very fast pro driver from what we're hearing down in the paddock, and we'll be looking forward to seeing what he's able to do in qualifying. Meanwhile, a little bit further down, we've got Paul Walton here, one of our RD Sim Sport drivers, making his way around right now as everybody's just on their outlaps at the moment and getting themselves hyped up for their opening flying lap. We've also got Dan Morey here in the Porsche 911, and whilst we're waiting for our drivers to go around onto their flying laps, let's take a look in the chat and see how you guys and girls are doing. I hope you've all had a fantastic week and that you're all keeping well, as it is Friday today. We can see No Mercy CYNL there. I believe that's Lambert Wedder there in the YouTube chat saying hello. It's good to see you, Mr. Wedder, and indeed Renus von Hammeren as well. I believe the two drivers racing for Team Racing Netherlands in this series, and both tuning in. And speaking of the drivers, we can see Hammeren's here in the car in the BMW M4, and as for Wedder, meanwhile, as we just try to find him around on circuit, and of course Renus on the AM category. Meanwhile, I believe Wedder is in the Pro category. And indeed, both of them bringing the BMW M4 to the circuit today, and a rather fetching livery there indeed, embracing the Orange Army colours that are associated with the Dutch flag, of course, as they make their way around. Indeed, we can just see whether they're attacking through the chicane very nicely as he makes his way up onto the bank of turn number 12. And as we continue to look around here, we do have Walmsley going onto a lap, so let's ride on board with Walmsley here, as he has got some traffic. Actually, somebody who's lost the car completely in the Ferrari there, and Walmsley not perturbed by it as he makes his way around on his opening flying lap, the first flying lap of the session, and as he comes through turns 1 and 2, got a bit of traffic coming out of the pits, but he keeps clear of it as he comes down into turn 3 here in the Ferrari 488 GT3 Evo, and as he makes his way a little bit wide of apex there, he's drifted wide. That is going to cost him about a tenth of a second because he didn't have the ability to get on the throttle as comfortably, but as he now charges up towards turns 4 and 5, going through 4 flat out here, we know the Ferrari is quite weak at this circuit compared to the other cars. We did see that in what was Lobby 1, the Ferrari's really struggling on the straights or the embankments, but really strong in the infield, so that's where the Ferrari's going to need to gain the time on everyone else, as Walmsley now makes his way into turn number 6 here, and really high up on that apex curve, getting the left hand wheel high, but he's lost the rear end as a result as the car tries to power through, and as a result Walmsley has to back the car off now and return to the circuit gradually with everybody coming through, and that is a very painful experience because it is a long time to get up to speed when you lose it coming out of 6 up onto the bank. But meanwhile, one driver who's also down below the yellow line right now is Rhys Young here, as he's just trying to get himself up to speed. But speaking of drivers getting up to speed right now, you can see Nigel Stock bringing out the Ford GT, the muscle, as he makes his way down towards what is the start-finish line here to go onto his opening flying lap. And let's ride on board with the sound of this Ford GT. And as you can hear it there, an absolute brutal of engine here as he makes his way into turn 1 and fights the steering wheel, fights the understeer of the chassis, despite the fact the engine's behind the driver, a very heavy car to rotate through the corners, but it's got a beast of an engine there as he makes his way down into turn number 3 here, a bit deep into the corner, but he's going for a late apex here to use the power to get out the corner and get a good acceleration run up towards turn number 5 here. And I think what Stock's targeting with this car is essentially using the power to his advantage rather than its handling characteristics, as he makes his way through 4 and up into 5 on his second flying lap, I should say. And as he comes through what is turn number 5 here, you can see at the moment it's not been the best of laps for Stock. He's currently P8 overall, and that puts him what is, in fact, he's dropped down to P9 right now, and that is P8 in class, in the Pro class. But as he makes his way through turn 6, a little bit of a bounce there on the exit of what was at turn number 6 as he came off the apex curve there. You can see the suspension just not wanting to settle down, not damping enough, and as he makes his way around the bank right now, it's just a case of listening to that engine roar. And as he makes his way down towards the bus stop chicane right now, looking for that brake marker just beyond the 2 board here, and as he stamps on the anchors, he comes into the corner. You can see the rear wanting to unsettle with so much speed in the car, and as he transfers his way through the chicane, nice and stable there as he exits and now gets back on the power full attack for the rest of the lap as he makes his way round on the banking here, turn number 12, and as we see him flying on through. And if you are wondering, by the way, with regards to his livery, what's it inspired by? If you look back to the old Ford Mondeos that raced in British touring car in, I believe it was the 90s and the early noughties, his livery is inspired by those. We haven't quite got the fidelity on the livery for you, but you can see the resemblance, I hope, as he crossed the line there. Stock, and he improves to a 45.497, but it's only good enough for provisional P11 at the moment. And speaking of a driver who's going very fast overall, the South African of Vessels, we said he was highly anticipated, and look at this, P1 in the AM class currently and P3 overall, and he's only 2.5 tenths off of Walton, who's our fastest pro and our fastest driver overall. Our provisional pole lap is a 44.5. As we look back into the chat right now, we can see Elwin Sykes there. We've also got Stefan Vessels tuning in. We've got Stefan Albanese, Poi Pecco. We've also got there Billy Goat Boy in the YouTube chat, R. Jansen 650, and we've also got Nigel Stock there. We've got plenty of you. We've also got Titan Taylor, Next Gen Racing in the Facebook chat. We've got, and also, well, I think we've got Stock 3090 in the YouTube chat as well, so we've got plenty of you tuning in. It's great to see you all in. Be sure to let me know your thoughts. I appreciate some of you are drivers who raced in this, so as a result, you don't try not to spoil anything too much for me as we continue to look at what is coming up towards the halfway point of qualifying right now. But Vessel's in a world of his own, and if you're wondering what the delta is in terms of between his time and the next highest pro, which is Stuart Taylor here in the Ferrari 488, well, I can tell you that delta at this point is, if we look at the differences between the two, Taylor on a 45.2 versus Vessels on a 44.7. That's the best part of half a second. And unless Vessels has had a major amount of slipstream and Taylor's yet to take slipstream, I think it could be the case that it's early doors for pole position in the AM class. As meanwhile, looking at Paul Walton, he's just gone fastest of anybody in the Lamborghini Huracan. The RD Simsport driver there, picking up a 44.2 and on the way, dodging a wayward Porsche 911. And I believe that was the Porsche 911 of Wiggins having a major moment as he's jumped back to the pits. But meanwhile, as we continue to look further around, we've got Mark Jardine here in the BMW M4 making his way around the circuit right now. And he's in the halfway point as he comes around and makes his way down towards the chicane here. And as he continues to push on through, heading down towards turns 8 through to 11 right now. The BMW M4, a highly anticipated car here. We did see in the coach, well, not in the coach David Academy, in the Apex Racing lobby, the BMW M4s were quite strong here, but they seem to struggle a little bit compared to Lamborghini Huracans by comparison. So we will have to wait and see how that plays out over the course of the racing here. Of course, whilst we've got a Pro and an AM class here, it's not to say that the overall iRating levels will be exactly identical, but it's a very close knit within this community here within Lobby 2. I can already assure you that. You can see that in the lap times here as we're getting even more times coming from what is our 32 driver contingent taken to the circuit today. We have approximately 40 to 50 drivers signed up, but only 32 could make it. We've still got plenty more to arrive later on in the season, and we can see that right now in terms of the splits. Well, Jardine on a 46 there, not a good lap from the BMW driver. His best of 46.4, and indeed he just set that lap. He's got a lot of work to do. It's meanwhile looking up to P20 overall right now in the very colourful 911 here, and indeed a very proud 911, and we can see it's the Perry making his way out of turns 10 and 11, now up onto 12, and well, the pro driver here really suffering in this qualifying session. But again, the Porsche 911, much like the BMW M4, one of those cars that we anticipated to be quite weak in terms of the fact it's made for handling, it's not made for speed, and that is where the difficulty comes. It's very strong on corner exit. Nobody's going to beat the Porsche on corner exit very easily, other than the Ferrari drivers perhaps, but when it comes to the straights or the embankments here, it's going to be the case that Perry is going to find that Porsche lacking as he comes across that timeline there, and his best of 45.9, he does not best it with 45.96 there. As meanwhile we look a little bit further back up front, I can tell you that Dan Mori meanwhile making his way through turn number 3 here. In fact, yeah, that does look to be turn 3, and as he emerges from turn 3 and heads up towards 4-5 right now, keeping his head down, keeping it smart, and he's currently P3 overall and P3 in the pro class as he comes up towards turns 4 and 5, and he is 2.5 tenths right now off of Williams, and a further half a tenth, so 3 tenths off our provisional pole and of Walton. As we can see Mori just making his way through the corners here and keeping it nice and smooth, as meanwhile Mark Sykes does improve to 45.7 there. The Ferrari driver starting to build up some pace, and I gathered from how it turned out and from what I heard down in the paddock in the build up to season 2, Sykes really was not happy with the way season 1 played out. He felt as though there was a lot left on the table over the entirety of season 1. He didn't quite get the results he wanted, or indeed he didn't quite feel comfortable with the Lamborghini Huracan, so he switched to the Ferrari 488 as he jumps to the pit. And meanwhile we can see Stock here flying around the chicanes here. That's coming out of turn 6, my apologies, and heading up onto turn number 7. And as he makes his way around right now, the Ford driver a long way down from his peers. Currently what is P13 in his class, P16 overall, as we do have just under 5 minutes of this qualifying session left to go. And we can see traffic moving out the way as Taylor there, Stuart P. Taylor with the slipstream of the Lamborghini Huracan ahead, and that's the number 57 car. And who is number 57? That's Michael Seal. So as a result, Taylor has gained on the run around the embankment there with the fact that he's had the toe off the Huracan. And that has really helped with the Ferrari right now, because to see a Ferrari, but I say that as if it's a new thing, Stefan Vessels is in a Ferrari as well and doing a fantastic job indeed, Vessels, and we'll have to wait and see how the number 227 driver hangs up here, because now between him and Taylor, as we see that Wiggins has improved to Visual P3, Vessels and Taylor are now going to be P6, P7, and that's P1, P2 in the AM class. But speaking of Wiggins, well, Wiggins has improved in the RD SimSport machine. He's now P3, and he is getting ever closer to his teammate Walton in terms of those qualifying standings. The separation now between P3 and P1 is only 1.5 tenths as it currently stands. 3.5 minutes this qualifying session to go, plus the overtime from drivers who are on a lap come the end of the 15-minute session. It is starting to build up, but meanwhile the Italian Stefano Albanese here just clutching straws at the moment with that P9 in the pro category, P11 provisional overall, and we can see not having the best of times right now. I think he's just trying to build himself up to a better lap here in the number 45 car, the BMW M4, as he makes his way through. And we did see Albanese have some moments of brilliance in the pre-season test races, but also some moments where I think he was kicking himself and thinking it could have gone better. And right now I think he might be thinking that things could be going a little bit better, but we'll wait and see how he gets on over the remainder of qualifying. Of course, qualifying is just one part of the 3-part race evening with the sprint race and the feature race. There's no points for qualifying unless you are the pole position man within class, of course. Then you'll get some bonus points. I believe it is 2 extra points for getting pole position in each class. But meanwhile, as this goes around, it is the case that the big points to score are in the races, as we see Dave Meakin here, the British driver, who's coming to a park here, coming to a standstill in the Ferrari, sets P7 overall there, P6 in the pro class. And meanwhile, Prouting here having to deal with Albanese there a little bit. I think Albanese in fact has lifted off and let Prouting through from what I'm hearing in my right hand here from a trackside observer as he makes his way through here. But Prouting, we saw how strong Prouting came on when he arrived in season 1. He was in the AM class, but there was a lot of questions with regards to how far could Prouting go, and there were moments when he was very close to challenging for the win in a good number of races. Now we'll have to wait and see how he goes. Now he's in the pro class in lobby 2 here as he makes his way around towards the timeline. Is this going to be an improvement from Prouting? I don't think so. He's got amber on all his sectors right now, which means he's down. He was a second down there on his personal best, a 44.7 his personal best, a 45.3 there, what he just set. And that whole second down on what is the best lap of this session. 2 minutes remaining. We've got Davide Favo, I should say, making his way through turn number 3 and getting it a little bit wrong. They're going a bit too wide, and that is going to glide into the wall. And I think he's going to be losing his left-hand wind mirror quite shortly there. But thankfully, it does seem to stay on, but it's probably a little bit crumpled as he's moving away and returns to the circuit. And he's got some traffic coming up behind him right now. But look at this, ladies and gentlemen. We can see Wiggins and Walton here working together a little bit as they make their way up towards turn 6. And in fact, that was what was the Ferrari earlier going off at turn 5, not turn number 3. I correct myself there, as we do see Wiggins right now, and I think he's got Walton behind him here, and the two of them are going to work together to try and get Walton a little bit more security versus Williams here in the hunt for pole position. And I can imagine, whilst they're racing as independent drivers, right, it's a drivers' championship, the fact that we do have teams of up to 3 drivers here, they can work together as long as they're not impeding other drivers and they don't get reported to the stewards afterwards. And you can see that's the case that Wiggins immediately pulls off the line there. He cuts across the chicane. I think he's pretty much had it set here through Walton. Okay, right, I've got enough speed, you can let me go now. And Walton's going to come around here. Can Walton improve from what is a 144.287? Can he improve to something better as Kirk moves up to P8 overall with 44.9, the pro driver there? And we're seeing that Vessels has improved once again, something we haven't actually seen in terms of on the lap or in terms of on the screen. As you can see here, once again, Walton being given a bit of a double toe here, and as he makes his way through, it hasn't been the best laps, and it's not enough from Walton to improve, but I think he will feel relatively secure unless Williams can pull something magical out the back. But I say that he's currently green in the second half of a lap here, and he's coming around right now. Could this be something to snatch pole as he makes his way up towards the timeline? He does have one of the next gen orange cars ahead of him right now. Can't quite tell who that is, the number 85 car, but I can tell you that Williams has got the toe, and Williams takes pole position there with 44.177. The tactics of slipstream have worked, and that is by 1/10 that he's taken pole position. And I do not think Walton's going to be able to respond to that. Wiggins is into the pits, And as the timer comes down to the end of the session right now, 15 minutes is complete. Everyone now has to finish their current lap. We've got a lot of drivers in the pits, and I think Stefan Wessels, the South African driver, will feel very comfortable with that P1 in the AM class on what is a 44.5. He's in a world of his own versus Taylor, who's 4 attempts down. Here's Taylor right now. Can Taylor find something magical here as he comes to the down to the chicane, I should say? I really do doubt it at this point, as we do see an improvement there for Nigel Stott. The Ford GT driver gets himself up to P8. That's P7 in the Pro class. Will we see it beat at all? We'll have to wait and find out as he makes his way on through. But meanwhile, looking back to Taylor here as he comes around, as he makes his way down to what was... makes his way down towards what is the final corner here as he comes all the way through. And as he comes down, will Taylor be able to improve? I don't think so. He's looking as though he's down in all the sectors, and as he comes to end, in fact, he bails into the pits here. So we've got Gareth Williams coming around right now. His personal best was that last one, of course, which took pole position, and he's on a down lap right now as Walton, I think, is not going to be our responses. No, he comes into the pits. What about Dan Morey? Morey here parking up. We've also got Paul Scott coming around right now, and Scott there in P6. And I believe it was Scott who worked with Williams in order for Williams to get that pole lap. But in the end, ladies and gentlemen, unless anybody sneaks any more laps in right now, I think everybody is down on an in lap. It is Gareth Williams who takes pole position in the Pro class by 1/10 over Paul Walton, and in the AM class it's Stefan Wessels who takes pole position by 4 tenths in the end over Stuart Taylor. That is a phenomenal qualifying session from Wessels. Can he turn that into a win in the sprint race? That is the big question, as the only drivers now to come in are Nigel Stott, Mark Jardine and Reese Young, as they're making their way around on circuit as they come on through. But I can see there in the YouTube chat, Josh Wiggins saying that it wasn't his Porsche that had that moment. Would you believe it was a lockup? That's fair enough, Wiggins. I'll still be learning the different cars here. I've got quite a few cars to try and put into the memory, but I appreciate being corrected. I don't mind it. Feel free to shout out, folks. If you think I've got something wrong, I will do my best to correct it next time. That's all part of the community spirit here, as we do see Reese Young right now just coming to what is the end of his qualifying session here, and he will be starting P32 in the race. He'll be starting right at the back here, but given how much carnage we did see at the start of the sprint race in the Apex Racing Academy lobby, you have to imagine here that starting right at the back for Reese Young, if he can keep it calm and keep it together, not like there coming out of turn 5, but if he can keep it relatively calm, he could be in for a good result. As we now look to the scenic view here and wait for the transition over to our opening race. As we are waiting, of course, at this point the dust settles and all our drivers will be twitching, but now we start to get the formation of the grid. And speaking of that grid then, we just wait for drivers to start to form on the line, and let's take you through it. So, on pole position in the end was Gareth Williams by 1/10 over Paul Walton. On the second row, Wiggins and Wessels line up. Wessels putting in an absolutely phenomenal qualifying session in the AM class there to take the AM pole position by 4 tenths. Our third row, Dan Morey and Matthew Prouting, followed by Scott and Stock on row number 4, Meakin and Kirk on row number 5, row number 6 going to Lamet Wedder, and then Stuart Taylor, our second AM driver in terms of this qualifying session. And then as we go a little bit further down the order, we can see there we have got... Excuse me 1 second. We have got Janssen and Seal lined up on row number 7. Baker and Scott lined up on row number 8. That is Nathan Scott. And then we've got Albanese and Doherty lined up on row number 9. Sykes and Favo lined up on row number 10. Perry and Renus Van, what was my apologies, I believe I may have got his surname slightly wrong here, and that is Renus Van Hemmeren on what is the 10th on the 11th row. When we've got Hobson and Walmsley on the 12th row, and as we continue to go down, we can see we've got Porter and Sykes on what is the 13th row, followed by Jardine and Delaney on the 14th row, and then on the 15th row we've got Quinn and Tack, and on our final row we've got Reese Young and Josh Brown. In the end, Josh Brown being out qualified by Reese Young. I think that was a glitch on our timing screen right at the end of the qualifying session, but it is Josh Brown who starts right at the back in the Lamborghini Huracan, and alongside him is Reese Young, as our drivers are just gridding up right now, and we will be going racing very shortly. Within approximately the next 30 to 40 seconds we will be pulling away, and as we look up to the blimp camera right now, we can see all of our drivers forming in formation here, all 32 drivers on that grid. We've got a couple of gaps where drivers are just finalising their connections, and as they join in right now, we look back to the TV screen here as it is Gareth Williams to take us away at the start of the sprint race. We've got the safety car, of course. It will be a rolling start, a partial rolling start, what with the grid starting off just before the chicane. And let's get ready to go racing as they all make their way off the line here. And as we look a little bit further back right now, a difficult qualifying session for Albanese, who's starting all the way down here in the middle of the field. But the Italian driver will look to try and play it safe, most likely, going into the opening couple of corners. Keep his head down, avoid any carnage, and then look to go racing as they make their way around on the circuit. But we'll wait and see, of course, because this circuit a very tight turn 1 apex, and that can cause quite a bit of carnage, as we do know. But as we look back up towards the front right now, we can see it's the case as they make their way through the turn 12 banking. We have got the two RD Simsport drivers side by side, and that is the combination of Wiggins and Walton here, and very close together. And I think perhaps thinking about how they can work this together to try and get themselves a P1, P2, and then go fighting over it later on in the race. As meanwhile behind we've got Vessels there, who'll be looking to get a very solid start and perhaps take the fight to the leaders in the Pro class. Let's wait and see, as now the pace car begins to peel away, and we are now waiting for Williams to take us away for the sprint race. And it's lights out and away we go as we open up the sprint race, and the first time of racing around this circuit today for the CDA drivers as they make their way down to turn 1. We can already see some changes of position here as we've got Walton and Wiggins making it through side by side. Vessels holding position as well, but looking a little bit further back, I think we've already had a major incident somewhere down the road, and I'm hearing that Mark Baker and Scott have been involved in an incident coming through the first corner. As we do look back on the pictures right now, we can see all our drivers making it through, but we do have a Ferrari that's gone a bit wide there. That is Walmsley getting it very wrong, and the car's having to take evasive action left, right and centre here as they all come down to turn 3, and it has been quite a chaotic incident. As meanwhile, looking back up towards the midfield, Meekin in P12 right now, gaining a number of places already, and as he makes his way up into turn number 5, we can see it's the case. In fact, he's dropped a couple of places side by side as we've got Lamborghini Huracan there. Oh, Alistair Kirk getting it a bit wrong as well. Oh, goodness me, and that BMW is wayward there, and that is Janssen getting it very wrong on the exit of 5. There's a Porsche that's been knocked across the circuit. That's Michael Seal, who has been involved in an instance subsequently with, I believe, that is a Porsche that's tried to rejoin, and he's rejoined there and clipped a car that's gone flipping over into what's the infield, as I believe that's not Liam Tack. Liam Tack's made it through safely, but I think Hobson was the car that was in the middle. That was the Porsche. And then I'm hearing further in my ear right now that Chris Perry was heavily involved in that incident. That's the rainbow coloured Porsche 911. But meanwhile, up front, I can tell you with all that kicking off, it is the case that Wiggins right now has taken the lead off of Williams in the run down towards the chicane. And as they make their way out the chicane up into the banking right now, Walton not too far behind, and he's now side by side with Williams. The two drivers, of course, very close in qualifying, but Wiggins has taken the position. And look at this, Maury trying to get in as well, as they're going to go 3 wide here in the run through 12 and up towards the start finish line. And this is only lap number 1 as they all encroach on the back of Wiggins here, and you can see the straight line speed of the Porsche. Like, oh goodness me, and it looks as though they're Williams and Maury involved in a tussle, and Maury goes for a spin here and collects Vessels, and Vessels has just become a victim of the carnage ahead of him when he couldn't find a way through, and that's a disaster for Vessels. As we can see, it's Wedder now trying to go around the outside of Kirk. He's going to do so here as they make their way around, and what an absolutely chaos-filled opening lap. As we can see, Vedder now up into P4. He's gained 7 places at the start here. This has been a very strong start for Wedder, but meanwhile Wiggins and Walton are now just running away with this as they make their way through 4 and up into 5, and you can see the Porsche here really struggling to break away from the Lamborghini, but you'd expect that given the relative speeds. But we have got a lot of cars that right now are trying to recover their races, and they've had some very, very chaotic races. As meanwhile we look back up the field slightly here, and we can see we've got down the field, I should say, we've got Brown in P14 making his way through turn number 4 right now, and Brown's gained a good number of positions. He's gained 19 places on the opening lap alone just by simply keeping his head down and being out the way there. The Lando Norris machine making his way out to turn number 5 and up towards 6. He has got the pressure, however, of what is Hammeren behind Van Hammeren, and then he's also got Baker closing up as these 3 make their way through, all battling for position within the AM class, I should say, as they emerge from turn 6 and up onto the banking once again at turn number 7. And behind with Baker here, well, he has got the throw. He's going to lose out quite significantly in the slipstream battle. But the fact that Ferrari really lacks that straight line speed by comparison as they make the way on through. And as they come down towards the chicane right now, Baker's just going to have to be a spectator. As we can see, there's Hamlin going on the inside here versus Brown. And as they come into the corner, he's going to be looking for the move on the inside, but he has to back out in the end as Brown cuts off the nose and makes his way through the chicane. And now as they make their way on through, we look and we ride on board here. Well, we were going to ride on board, but he's going for the move down the inside already, with the fact that it looks as though Brown having a very poor run out the chicane sequence and Hamlin just waiting for that opportunity. And now Baker's going to try and come on through as well as he makes his way down the low and follows through the BMW here, using that slipstream to his advantage. As you can see now, they change places once again, and it looks like Hamlin's trying to bring the Lamborghini back into the battle, and they go 3 wide here in the run down towards turn 1. It's Ferrari on the inside, Lamborghini in the middle, and BMW on the outside here, and the Lamborghini driver's going to go for it. And as Brown goes heavy on the brakes, he's going to lock up the brakes, so I have the possibility, but he nails the corner there, and you can see Baker having to really be hesitant when he got on the throttle, but he's going for it. There's a little bit of a tussle, and there's contact between the two of them as Baker returns to the circuit, and you can see that Hamlin having to back off, and Brown losing out through that little bit of a tap there. But I think they were going to try and go too wide into a corner where there was only one way of coming out of it, and it's Brown who's lost the 2 places. Baker's now gained 2 places, and Hamlin's only gained the 1 as they make their way through 4 and up into 5 once again. But meanwhile, looking further up the field, I can tell you that Walton right now is our leader. He has got past Wiggins. Now, in terms of when that happened, I believe it happened in the slipstream run around on the previous lap right now, as we are just waiting and to see how it plays out between these two. But I can tell you that Gareth Williams is now 2.4 seconds back and still losing speed at the moment on these guys as they make their way through the chicane once again. Webber, meanwhile, has been trying to close up, but we've now got the traffic starting to filter in. The drivers who've had the difficult starts to this sprint race, of course, now had to jump to the pits in order to do repair work on the car, use that free repair. They've come out in all of this effectively in terms of in amongst the leaders, because it's Doherty just ahead of Vedder and then Perry as well. And then you've got Williams up the road, so Wedder's got a lot of work to do to close up. But meanwhile, we can see here Wiggins versus Walton. They're just changing places here, playing it smart and playing the team game, which is I give you the slipstream, you give me the slipstream, we don't lose any lap time. As we see the fastest lap now set by Wiggins at 44.324. Who said the Porsche couldn't go fast around here? But as they make their way around, we look a little bit further back and we can see here Tax had a very poor run through what looks to be, unless I'm very much mistaken, the run out of turn number 6 into 7. In fact, that Ferrari does look as though it's a bit worse where he's just lost 2 places as a result of it, as Janssen meanwhile trying to close back up to Brown. But meanwhile, Brown here, he's looking to go past what is Walmsley, a back mark, and Walmsley will have to respect the blue flags, but Walmsley doesn't, and he decides to keep his nose in here, and I think he may be focusing so much on the racing at this point that it's not working out for him, as Van Hameren's just up the road, and you can see this has cost what is the AM driver massively of Brown, as now he's got Janssen, the pro driver, at the back of him, and the pro driver will want to try and squeeze on through as quickly as possible because he'll feel he's got the pace. But then again, this could be used to the advantage of the Team Racing Netherlands drivers of what is Hameren and Janssen. Remember, they're both teammates, and as they make their way through turn number 4 and up into 5 here, they stay as they were. No change at this point in time as they all try to filter things through. Meanwhile, a little bit further down in P19 right now, after having that disastrous start, Hobson right now in P19. He's gained 4 places since the start of this race, and also quite a bit of damage to the car, which I think has been repaired to an extent, unless I'm mistaken him for another one of the Porsches. But as he makes his way through turn at number 3 and up towards 4, is the case he's chasing after Delaney right now, and as they make their way up towards turn 4 and 5 here, I think it's going to be the case he's not going to be close enough to go on the offensive versus Delaney this time, but he's definitely building up to something here as Hobson as he comes on through. These two drivers, of course, battling in the AM class. They'll be battling for P11 at this point in the race, and as they make their way on through right now, 7 minutes to the race complete, still plenty to come as Walton and Wiggins change places once again in the run down towards turn number 1, and we can see here Hobson continuing to close as we ride on board with the Porsche 911 giving the pursuit as they emerge from turn 6. You can see the differences in lines between the two drivers there, where Hobson taking a tighter exit line, so that way he just naturally straight lines up onto the banking, whereas the case that Delaney really extended the exit from the apex in order to try and essentially cut that tow line. But now as they make their way up in towards the 6th gear here, you can hear the whine of that Porsche engine as it's getting up to top speed, and he's going to be looking for the move. Hobson, will he go for it here into the chicane? No, he waits, he thinks about it, he plays the smart game, which is to wait for the run out of 12, and as they make their way through the chicane here, through 10 and 11, he goes a little bit wide of 10. That's going to lose him a couple of attempts in terms of overall time. He's going to lose that speed, and he'll feel it because he won't be close enough to go for the move now until literally they've crossed that timing line and they look towards the braking zone for turn number 1. And to give you an idea, whilst we can't read on his speedo right now, I can tell you that Hobson, in terms of the speed he's building up to, well, the highest he's reached is 178. He's currently doing 170 and still building as he's getting closer and closer and closer to Delaney. He looks for it, but he goes on the low bank there. He's not close enough to go for it there, and it was the case that Delaney parking the car quite nicely in the middle of the road in order to create a defense. And as they make the way through. He's going to have to wait a little bit longer as Hobson to try and get that P18. But meanwhile, looking for these guys a little bit further up the road, back to Hamron once again here. We can see Hamron really having difficulty even now. He's having to battle against someone who is his peer, and that is Baker. Of course, these two battling for position. Mark Baker, oh goodness me, and Hamron there getting it very wrong, just a little bit too early on the power on the exit of 6, and as a result the rear completely cutting around. And as he rejoins, now he's going to have to be careful. He'll have cars coming through behind him, but I think it's a-okay as he returns to the racing. But Baker will be breathing a sigh of relief right now in that Ferrari, because the one weakness of that Ferrari, of course, is its straight line speed around here, and the BMW behind him would have given him a lot of clout. As we're hearing that Lambert Weather's had a major moment there coming through the chicane, and he's just rejoining right now. Now I'm not sure if he's involved in contact with another car. Unfortunately, we won't be able to bring you that replay, but I can tell you that Lambert Weather right now has not had the best of races, albeit he's still 2 places up on where he started, but it's not the race he would have dreamt of for his opening sprint race of the season, as he will now be chasing down Elwyn Sykes. And Elwyn Sykes, meanwhile, to give you an idea, the AM driver here, well, he's battling with Nigel Stock, and Stock in all of this is now feeling that pressure from the Ferrari behind. But I think the Ford driver will feel comfortable here in the fact he's battling with an AM driver rather than someone in his own class, as we've got a Ferrari there spun out, and I believe that is Favo in the middle of the road there. Davide Favo in the middle of the road at turn number 1. As they make the way on through down towards turn number 3 right now, no overtaking opportunity for the time being, as Favo just has to wait to get turned. You can see here he's been as patient as possible in order to get the car moving. But in all of this, one thing I haven't pointed out to you, ladies and gentlemen, Mark Sykes, who started in the midfield through all of this, is up into the lead of the AM class right now, and in a world of his own. He is 5.9 seconds ahead of Elwyn Sykes, who's P2 in the AM class. And well, it's the case that Mark Sykes is having the day he would have wanted in terms of how this has played out right now, because he is leading, and by a comfortable stretch with 5 minutes to go here. I think this could be a top step at the rate it's going. But meanwhile, looking further down, Jardine here in P3 in the AM class, P9 overall. He's got Baker all over the back of him right now, Mark Jardine. And as they make the way out the corner here, we ride on board the gearbox of the BMW, and we should see that Ferrari not get too close here. They say objects may appear closer than they seem in the mirror. Well, it is the case that Ferrari is actually going to get smaller until they make the way off the banking, because as you can see, whilst that Ferrari is in the slipstream here, the BMW's just got so much power by comparison, or straight line speed I should really say, and it's only now as they're about to get to that braking zone that you can see them close up. Of course, what the Baker can do, he can look to be a bit heavier on the brakes by comparison, and as they make the way through, you can see he's really capitalising as the fastest lap's now been upgraded to a 44.0 in the hands of Wiggins, our race leader, with Walton behind him still. And as they make the way up on the banking, coming back to the here and now, we can see Jardine taking the low line here, as we see Baker going up high, but he hasn't got the speed, and this is the problem for Baker. What does he do in terms of getting through? He needs to go as late as possible here and build up so much speed, as we see Walmsley really catching up to the pair of them right now, and he is a lap down, of course, so Walmsley will be expected not to fight for this or unlap himself, as Baker tries to go all the way around the outside, and he does so, I believe, unless Baker's got it wrong. No, Baker has nailed it under braking. He's up into P9, and that is P3 in the AM class. He's up onto the potential podium here as he makes his way through the turn 2 and up towards turn 3. A brave move there, but at the same time, Jardine being a little bit obliging, I think, and backing off quite early. 9, that is some good points on the board, even if he comes P4 at this point. But he'll have to be careful of that, because he has got Brown chasing after him, and he's only 3 seconds down is Brown. But looking at from these guys to further up the field, meanwhile, our race leaders, in case you forgot about them, Wiggins and Walton here, and running in formation still at this point in time. And it's the case the RD Sim Sport drivers here. I think they're going to be going for another position swap, most likely come off into the bank in a turn 12 as they come into the chicane, and you can see it's the case the Lamborghini Huracan driver of Walton at the rear of your picture, Wiggins at the front, and just playing nose to tail for the time being, but keeping it nice and smooth, as we are hearing that Stock has had a bit of a moment at what was on at the start of this lap. He's had a bit of a moment around the circuit, and was, I think, turn number 1, alternatively 3. We're not sure what quite's happened, but we know he's lost a bit of time. In fact, he's fallen behind Weather once again. He's still in P6 in the Pro Class Stock, P8 overall, as he is trying to close up to the back of the BMW driver right now. But I think Stock's got some way to go as the Englishman, as he chases after Weather, the Dutchman, as they make their way through the chicane sequence. And to be fair, despite the girth of that Ford GT, it is the case that it is doing phenomenally well in chasing after the BMW ahead of him. But as we're hearing that Liam Tack has had a major moment. In fact, that's Tack. We did see Tack having a bit of a moment earlier coming out of what was turn 6. He's had another moment as he makes his way up onto 7, and Tack having a day not to remember in this sprint race as he now rejoins. He's P19 overall, and that is P11 in the AM class, as meanwhile we look back to Stock right now, who's trying to close up to the behemoth of the BMW ahead of him. The two giants of straight line speed, and you can see that under braking. Stock trying to go much later on the brakes by comparison, and it hasn't worked out this time. And if you're wondering why Elwyn Sykes has suddenly jumped up to lead, ladies and gentlemen, that is a glitch on our timing screens. Elwyn Sykes has not gained the positions from what I'm hearing on my tracker. So as a result, it's just a small time glitch, which will fix itself eventually. As we do see here, Stock trying to go round the outside, but he gets on the power too early, and the rear spins out as he now is stuck there up on the grass and has to get the car turned once again, just a little bit too soon on the power. But it was a good attempt at an exit as the Pro Driver now falls down to P12 overall. That's P7 in class, and ahead of him now is Josh Brown as he goes charging through turn 4 and up into turn number 5. But with all this happening, meanwhile, I can tell you that a little bit further down the road, we do have Hobson here, who's got a bit of traffic behind him, battling for position. That's Stefan Vessels, who's moving out the way, and that's still Michael Steele, the Pro Driver here, who's chasing after Hobson and Delaney, the two AM drivers who are battling for position, it should be pointed out. But as they make their way up towards what is turns 4 and 5, it is the case. And as they come charging on through, no real changes at this point in time as they make their way through 5 and up towards 6. And I think the difficulty right now is limited time available. It's more about conserving position than doing anything else. As meanwhile, it is the case that we see that Walton still he's leading this race right now. And he's made the break, I believe, from Wiggins. He's made quite a sizable break, in fact, as Wiggins is now the best part of 3.5 seconds back on Walton. I think for Wiggins, it may be one of those situations where he's backed the car off considerably as they make their way down towards what is turn number 3 and keeps it smart for the time being. Meanwhile, further down, I can tell you with this happening, meanwhile, it is the case that Mark Sykes still our leader in the AM class, although it doesn't show that on screen right now. I believe it is the case he is our leader in the AM class. The Next Gen Racing orange driver just keeping his head down and getting on with this race and doing a very good job as he makes his way through turn number 3 for the time being. He's got a sizable gap of what is 10 seconds over Mark Baker, and here is Baker to give you an idea in all of it. Mark Baker in P2 in the AM class right now, and we are on that final lap as the timer hits 15 minutes right now. So this is the final lap. We will complete 9 laps of the circuit, but behind Baker he's got Jardine battling with Janssen and also Brown a little bit further. Well, Brown's the best part of 5 seconds back, so I think for the case it's Jardine just having a hold of what is Walmsley. He's a lap down, and he's got the spacer of Walmsley versus Janssen as they make their way through turn number 5 once again here, and the lap is coming to a close. And speaking of somebody who's bringing it to a close right now, as he makes his way through the chicane here, Paul Walton is just flying as he heads around and up onto the banking for the final time. And in terms of his race, it's been one of those, he didn't start on pole, of course. He was beaten to pole in the end by Gareth Williams right at the end of qualifying with a very close shootout. But as he now comes off that banking, he's worked with Wiggins to break away, and he's broken away himself in the final hour, and it is going to be Paul Walton who comes across the line to take the win in the sprint race overall and in the pro class. Behind him will be Josh Wiggins here as he crosses the line in P2. Gareth Williams in the end in P3. Stefan Albanese, by the looks of things right now, heading up towards what will be a P4 finish here, and a good drive from the BMW driver as he comes across that line. And then look at this, ladies and gentlemen, would you believe it? He's come all the way up 14 positions, and he's going to take the win in the AM class in the sprint. Mark Sykes is your AM winner, and by the looks of things, I think it is Mark Baker who is your P2 driver for the AM class, as he's going to come across the line very shortly. Lambert Wedder just come ahead of him in P7. Then we've got Mark Jardine in the end, who comes across the line P3 in the AM class. Janssen just behind him in the pro class. Nigel Stock P7 in the pro class and P11 overall. Renus van Hammeren in what is P5 in the AM class right now, making his way to complete the race here, and he will finish P12 overall. Then you've got Tom Porter, who we haven't really talked about Tom Porter, but he's done a phenomenal job to finish P6, given the fact that he started all the way down in P18. And then it's going to be Favo here, comes across line P14, that's P7 in the AM class, followed by Delaney. Then we've got Seal, and then it's going to be a Luke Hobson in P17, followed by Matthew Prouting here in P18. Then we've got Josh Brown coming across the line very shortly in the very heavily wounded Huracan. In fact, Reece Young's going to take the position on the line there, and it's going to be Brown who crosses the line just about in a rather fabulous fashion, albeit, goodness me, I think Kirk's just been, oh goodness, and Kirk being clipped there and had no way to go, and has been turned into a rolling machine. That is very unfortunate, but congratulations to all of our drivers, and a special congratulations to our winners of both Paul Walton in the pro class and, well, Mark Sykes in the AM class here. And, well, give us a brief moment, ladies and gentlemen, give us 2 to 3 minutes, and we'll be bringing you those post-race interviews. They'll be coming right up. Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, we have just had it in that we've got both our winners of the Pro and Am categories waiting to be interviewed, which is fantastic news. A very eventful race, I must say, for the opener of the sprint races at Daytona. Very, very eventful, much like what we saw in the Apex Racing Academy lobby. And whilst we did have a smaller field, I think there were some incidents in the middle of the field which really caused the field to open up. And it'll be very interesting to hear, in particular, from Mark Sykes, who was right in the thick of that, and I think gained massively from it. But we start off, of course, with our Pro winner. That's the number 98 driver of Paul Walton. Hello, Paul. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Paul, a brilliant drive to open up your season campaign, taking the win at Daytona in the sprint race. How's it feel to be on the top step?
I mean, it was hard work, but I think from the get-go we were pretty fast and we managed to just keep it clean and keep it running around.
Just taking it back a step to qualifying, very close between yourself and Williams for pole position in the end. We saw a bit of teamwork from yourself with what was Wiggins to try and get pole through the slipstream. Did it feel a little bit of a heartbreak moment not to take that pole, or was it a case of, okay, we'll just get him in the race?
I'll be honest, I was celebrating coming around. I thought it was in the bag, honestly. And so, yeah, a bit disappointing to not get it, but hey, we converted it at the end.
Indeed, and then just taking us through the start of the race, we saw a great start from yourself, making your way up into the lead quite early on alongside Wiggins, and the two of you doing a very smart job to go side by side through the opening sequence of corners. What was the plan? Was it a case of just get into the rhythm and then start to build the attack? We didn't quite see the overtake, I think, that Wiggins made at the start into the chicane, but what was the overall game plan?
There wasn't really a game plan, just kind of get ahead and get going. But I lost, I think, 2 or 3 positions from the get-go in the first 2 corners. And following Wiggins into the bus stop, I wasn't expecting him to dive down the inside into the bus stop. So he was in the lead from the bus stop. And I was hoping he was going to come up and give me the tow into second place. And then obviously you've seen the four wide carnage after that followed.
Indeed, and I think where you positioned yourself in relation to that the four wide carnage was quite fortunate, but also smart. And after that carnage kicked off, at that point, did your mentality to the race change at all? Or was it the case, right, we've got to make that break and just run with this now?
Well, the Porsche, I can't remember the guy's name. We were kind of worried about him. Like all 4 of us at the front, we were concerned that we were just going to be in a train the whole way. But as soon as that happened, we had a bit of a break. I think it was 1 or 2 seconds by the end of the second lap. So we just kind of head down and just kept going forward.
Understandably, and then come the end, once you'd made that breakaway with Wiggins, at that point we saw you make the break even further and take the lead and just not let go of it. Was that just the case that you had a little bit of reserve in the tank, or was it one of those sort of that you decide, you know what, I'm just going to gradually disappear off into the distance?
Well, the first 10 minutes, we were just kind of chopping and changing, keeping it, not losing any time, just going. And then after that, I just went. Like, at some point, you've got to kind of race for yourself, right?
Ah, you do indeed. I know that feeling myself, but racing for yourself benefited you very well. And whilst I appreciate it happened in the past, thoughts going into the feature race, given that you'd be starting right towards the back?
Well, we'll just see what happens, because I seen the carnage in the midfield of the sprint race, and I'm a bit worried about getting caught up in that. So just focusing on getting through the first few laps and then see where we go from there. It's a long race.
Well, we look forward to seeing how you get on in the feature, but thank you for joining us in the interview room and good luck in the feature.
Thank you for having me.
Hearing there from Paul Walton, who put in a phenomenal drive alongside Wiggins, of course, the two of them working in tandem, and a bit of fortune with the 4 wide incident coming across the timing line to complete lap 1, whereas the case that Walton and Wiggins were able to emerge from that unscathed. Meanwhile, Williams was not able to, and also the Porsche alongside him. But speaking of one driver who found his way through it all unscathed, and in the end brought home a fantastic result, it's time to have a chat to Mark Sykes. Just give us 2 seconds, ladies and gentlemen, we'll get him in here. Hello, Mark. Can you hear me? Give us a brief moment, ladies and gentlemen. Some slight technical issues. Mark, if you're there. We'll just give Mark a couple of seconds to try and get things fixed, but if not, it may be the case that we do have to proceed on to what is the feature race. I think Mark might be having some slight technical troubles at the moment with his microphone. We're going to try and work with him to get those fixed in the meantime and bring you his thoughts, but a fantastic race for Mark, it has to be said. Give us 2 seconds, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, well, it looks as though we might be continuing to have some technical issues on what is Mark's end here. So what we're going to do, ladies and gentlemen, we are now going to take a brief break. We will be back in approximately 14 minutes, so that will be at 5 to 9 GMT this evening, 20:55, for what is the build-up to the feature race. But in the meantime, if we are able to get Mark on to his microphone and get him into the interview room properly and formally, we'll bring you that quick interview. But until then, don't go anywhere. We've got plenty of racing coming up in the feature race. It's only 13 minutes away. Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen. Well, good news. We are back a little bit earlier than planned because we have been able to get Mark Sykes on the microphone. I can tell you he's not quite overly speechless in terms of getting the win in the AM class, but we can hear now from Mark. What do you think about that, Mark? Fantastic drive. How's it feel to be on the top step?
Oh, it's absolutely brilliant. I wasn't expecting that at all. Game plan coming into the first race was basically keep my head down, keep it consistent, and see where I got. I'm so surprised about getting the win. Absolutely over the moon with that. Obviously, quality P, was it P19? No way I expected to get right up there. I think a lot of it was from a lot of other drivers' misfortunes. You know, first race nerves. Looked like a lot of guys having incidents, but win's a win, and really happy with it.
Oh, indeed. And I have to ask, because we didn't quite see all the carnage that happened into turns 1 and 3, but I assume you were right in the thick of that. Just take us through what was going through your mind at the start. Were you thinking, okay, it's a case of dodge this, dodge that, or just close your eyes and pray you make it through?
Yeah, I mean, where I was my game plan in this first corner was just hold back a little, just see what happens, and then all of a sudden the carnage started happening, and I was dodging left, dodging right, missing everybody, and thank God I got safely through it all. And then I think it was basically onto the bank section. That's when it sort of cleared up, and then managed to get my head down and concentrate on my racing.
And then when you had the opportunity to sort of get your head down and concentrate, what was the strategy from that point? Had you worked out in terms of where you were going to gain? Because we know the Ferrari really struggles with straight line speed compared to its competitors around here.
Yeah, I mean, thankfully, last season, it's my first real season in iRacing. I come from console, like a lot of the other guys. Happy with my performance last season, but this season I really want to concentrate. So I spoke to Billy Fletcher, who is obviously a quick driver in Lobby 1, and he's given me a little bit of coaching, which we did around Daytona. We did about an hour around there, and he pointed out a few places where I could pick up speed, braking points, etc., which really helped for race 1. And that was what I brought into the race and carried on through the race, just hitting those braking points, hitting the turn points, keeping it consistent, and it worked. Really happy.
Oh, definitely, and I can hear that in your voice. And I do have to ask, when you saw yourself take the lead, and particularly when Stefan Vessels, who put in a phenomenal qualifying lap within class, it has to be said, when he had the incident on what was the start of lap number 2, which saw him drop all the way down the order, was there a point when you were sort of driving around, you just had a massive grin on your face and going, okay, don't blow it, don't blow it, don't blow it?
No comment. No, yeah, it was. It was a bit nervous being up front, to be honest. It was, I was actually sweating buckets, if I'm brutally honest. Sort of really nervous, a bit shaky, thinking I'm leading, I'm going to mess it up. I personally thought I was going to mess it up. I didn't know, so I'm just over the moon.
Oh, that's fantastic to hear, and I appreciate whilst it's in the past, thoughts going into the feature race, given the fact you'll be starting quite far back, approximately P27.
Yeah, the feature race, I was obviously, it's a bit weird for me starting towards the back, because I'm usually up the front, because I'm usually last in most races. But yeah, exactly the same game plan, just take it easy into the first corner, and then just pick people off. And then obviously there was quite a few. Yeah, that was the game plan basically. So we'll see in the race.
Well, thank you for joining us in the interview room, and we look forward to seeing how you get on in the feature race.
Lovely, thank you, Paul.
Hearing there from Mark Sykes, ladies and gentlemen, very happy with that win in the sprint race, and now looking upwards and onwards to the feature race. But with that, we are going to be back very shortly for the build-up to the feature race. We may be a couple more minutes later than originally planned, just because we're able to catch Mark there as we're getting set up for the feature. But we will be back with you by 9 o'clock, so in 7 minutes' time. Don't go anywhere. Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, we are back now with the build-up to the feature race here. We're only a couple of minutes away before we go racing once again, and as it currently stands, it is expected to be a very fast and furious feature race over the course of 60 minutes. But the big question, of course, is what can we expect over an hour of racing? Well, we do have that mandatory pit stop, of course, which will throw a spanner in the works for a good number of drivers, for the simple reason that it's not going to be just about outright pace, it's also about playing the strategy. And that's something which can catch drivers by surprise, particularly when they're used to just running from start to finish without a pit stop. As we see Stuart Taylor here making his way through turn number 6 and just coming on through. But as our drivers continue to make their way around, it is one of those situations where they'll be thinking about the strategies right now, making sure they're all set to go. And as we can see here, Kirk making his way down into turn number 5 here, just on a practice lap in Lamborghini Huracan. It's one of the situations where I think it's going to be quite tense for all of our drivers, but also feeling quite positive down the paddock if they've had a good race. Alternatively, if they had a bad sprint race, well, they'll be starting up towards the front, and it could be a major opportunity for a driver to get a strong result after a dismal sprint. But we will have to wait and see, of course, how that all plays out, as in the meantime, we are now just counting down the seconds. We've got a bit of a glitch in our timeout at the top there, but it should be the case that we will be transitioning over to the feature within the next 1 to 2 minutes, and then we will get the proper timer for the 60 minutes of racing, as we've just got a couple more drivers right now just getting themselves set. As we see Porter there just parked up, and in fact jumping back to the pits does Porter having a bit of a difficult race, but we did see him come up through the field to an extent over the course of the 15-minute sprint. But now we'll have to wait and see, and I think strategy is going to be an important one here, but at the same time you don't want to come out necessarily in completely clear air, because then you lose the right to slipstream in the run around the circuit. But that's the challenge that everyone will have to figure out, is when do they choose to fit, when do they choose to pit, I should say, and fit back in to the racing pack? That will be the question. But as we continue to look around here, we've got Paul Scott just making his way through the chicane sequence, and right now just coming on through on another practice lap as well. But it's been great to see your thoughts in the chat, and we can see a lot of people giving a praise to Mark for his win, and also to, oh goodness me, excuse me a second, what was our other driver there of Walter for his win? Walton, I should say, not Walter. Paul Walton getting his win, and as a result, the 2 debut winners. And it's fantastic to see in terms of, well, Walton in particular making his debut in this series, and Sykes having that opportunity to arrive on the top step for the first time. Will he be able to make it 2 out of 2? And will it be the same for Walton as well? That is the big question. As we do come to the end of this practice session, and we now wait to switch over to the race any moment now, as we can see here, just Scott making his way through, and there's the transition, ladies and gentlemen. So as our grid will form very shortly, what will be the partial rolling start line, we're just waiting for the cars to appear right now, and I believe Paul Walton being the very first driver to line up. He'll be lining up right towards the back here. We will get an update on that timing screen very shortly. But our grid then, for the purposes, well, it looks as though we might have a slightly glitched grid here, folks, so we're not going to be relying on that grid chart to tell us the order of our race. Just have to give us 2 seconds whilst we try to fix our timing screens here. But it's the case, Walton definitely not starting on pole, in fact starting down towards the back here. But hopefully this should fix itself, otherwise we may need to just quickly pop out and pop back in to the race in order to try and get those timings updated correctly for you, because right now we have our grid which is completely out of order. In fact, give us 2 seconds, ladies and gentlemen, we are just going to get that fixed for you, because I think this issue is going to plague us. We'll be right back, no more than 2 minutes. Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, we are back, and the good news is the issue is fixing itself. Our timings are now being updated, and it is Liam Tack who takes us away from pole position alongside Scott. In fact, the 2 drivers side by side here as they make their way out of the chicane, and as they come on through, I do believe it's actually going to be Scott who is our pole position man here with the reverse grid. But either way, both drivers will be now looking to have a good start and just break from the rest of the field. Whether they'll be able to do so or not, that will be the challenge. And further down, with the fact we have 31 drivers returning for this race, Gareth Mills being right at the back in this one, it is the case, and Walton will be in that P30 position, who can come out on top as we go away for an hour of racing. Well, let's just wait and see, and it's all for Tack and Scott to take us away to the green. And it's lights out and away we go, as we can see Tack getting a good start there. But meanwhile, Scott having to go very defensive versus Vessels, who's looking to make the best recovery drive he can here. And Vessels looking to that inside already, but he can't find it. Meanwhile, Scott holding firm as Dan Mori comes through there up into P5. Looking further down, we've got Elwin Sykes, who's dropped a couple of places already as they make their way through the sequence of corners here. And we can see everybody taking a bit of a more cautious approach this time through the opening 2 corners. Coming down to turn 3 right now, we've got Tom Porter right in the midst there in P21. But no major incident this time around. Everybody making it through, although I say that, and immediately there's been a major incident now on the exit of turn 3, and it looks like Stefan Vessel's right in the heart of that, along with Chris Perry as well. I'm not sure what's happened there as Perry jumps to the pit, but Attack has been able to get through unscathed up front alongside Scott and Maury, as we can see Paul Scott behind. So Nathan Scott in P2, Paul Scott in P4, and as we look a little bit further down the order once again here, we can see we've got Nigel Stock here battling with Mark Sykes. He's going to try and go around the outside here into turn 6, but Sykes going to put his nose in there and say there's no way through, and this will cripple Stock's ability to get on the power soon. Well, the fact the Ford GT will understeer when he puts the foot down, and Stock has to open that steering arc. But as they make their way now up onto the banking, you can see that Stock getting close, as we see Nathan Scott battling with Tack here in the run down towards turn number 8. But it is the case in 2 different classes here, so Tack doesn't need to fight this one. He can let the Pro through, but Tack goes very deep and up onto the grass here, and he's going to have to rejoin right onto the racing path of everyone, as we see Quinn coming on through here. Adam Quinn, as he avoids the carnage, and as they make their way down through turn 11, you can see Elwin, oh goodness me, and Sykes being clipped there by what appears to be, I think that was Hobson coming through and just not enough space. And I think it was the case that one driver turned into the other, but who turned into whom, that is the question, and that's for the stewards to decide. But meanwhile, Matthew Proughton coming through for all this in P20, and meanwhile right up front, I can tell you that going on to another lap already, it's Scott versus Maury here, and Maury's going to go down the low. Meanwhile, we can see Scott goes to move around the outside, but he goes way too late on the brakes and carries too much momentum, so Maury up into the lead after the opening lap, followed by Paul Scott behind him. And we can see in the rearview picture Lamborghini Huracan Quinn having a moment, as we can see Scott now return Nathan Scott into P3, the 2 Scotts going chasing after Maury, as meanwhile Walmsley is your leader at the moment in the AM class there in P4, followed by Renus Van Hammeren in P5. Then we've got Liam Tack in P6, followed by Rick Jansen in P7, and then Lambert Wedder in P8, followed by Favo in P9. Then it's Sykes in P10. That's Elwin Sykes, I should say. Josh Wiggins, meanwhile, in P11 and battling with Sykes here, but he can't find a way through the Pro driver versus the AM as they make their way through turn number 4 and up into 5. Heavy on the brakes, they're going to go. And we see Wiggins here going for it. He's gone very late on the brakes, but there's plenty of room to do it. And he's caught the car very nicely there. Wiggins up another position here and knowing to get a move on, as we can see. Meanwhile, it's the case that Young has now got Walton coming on the inside here. And Walton, of course, having taken that win in the Pro class now, Paul Walton will do everything he can in order to try and get through, because you can see that Wiggins has made his way through and he'll want to be with his teammates as they charge up through the ranks. They've made a lot of ground already in the opening 3 minutes. They've still got 57 minutes to go, and plenty more ground to gain. Can they gain it though? That is the big question, as we can see. And meanwhile, it's the case that Baker going up into the high here versus Sykes on the low ground as they make their way down towards turn 8. But it's going to be Walton who makes it 3 wide, and as they all come down to the corner here, Walton's going to make the double pass. We can see Rhys Young there taking advantage, and Rhys Young with a very late move, but a very smart move there to gain the place off of Baker. Who would have thought it was going to happen? Well, Young's made it happen, and now as they emerge and head up onto the bank into turn 12, Young up into P13, as we are seeing it's the case. Goodness me, I think we've got a slight technical issue there. I think we've got a couple of drivers with some slight technical issues with latency, but as the screen now updates, we can see that it's Tack down on the low ground here versus Jansen up on the high ground as they make their way onto another lap. And we can see it's the case that Tack, well, he doesn't need to battle these guys. Jansen and Wedder behind are both Pro drivers, but just ahead we can see Hamron here, where it's the case that he's just got ahead of Walmsley, who's had a major moment. And Walmsley there, where it's the case, goodness me, what has happened to, well, that's Lambert Wedder coming through, but I think we have just had one of the BMWs go for a spin, and actually Jansen involved in an instant, I think, with one of the other drivers coming through turn 2, and he's clipped the pit exit wall, and that's Jansen who's dropped down the order, and he's gone all the way down after gaining so much at the start. He's lost out massively as Jansen as he now resumes racing. But meanwhile, as they make their way out of turn 3, you can see how it's all kicking off here. So we've got Rhys Young battling with Walmsley here, and Walmsley with a crippled Ferrari goes straight on out of turn 4. There's no way that Ferrari's going to make the corner, and oh goodness me, we do have slight connectivity issues with the lobby. I think that's on Reese Young's end, but now it has calmed down once again. Apologies for that, folks. We do have drivers who every so often do appear in and out of existence, and we've got the same thing with Kirk here as he makes his way out of turn 6, but he's in P8 right now, and as everything calms down once again here, we can see that Sykes, having started all the way down towards the back of the field, he's already up into P10. He's gained massively at the start of this race. He's gained 14 places already, and as he charges down towards what is the chicane, once again he's chasing up to Elwin right now, and I think Elwin at this point is not going to fight this one too hard, at least at the time being, because they've got plenty of time to go, and there's no need to battle at this point in the race as they make their way through the chicane and now head up onto the banking of 12. But whilst this is going, I think Elwin right now has had a moment of sorts. In fact, Elwin into the wall there. We didn't see how that happened on camera, but Elwin into the wall, and well, he straight lined into the wall by the looks of things, and the South African is having a day to forget at Daytona, and it's normally one you want to remember at Daytona, but not for him. As we can see here, Maury has been passed by both of the Scotts, Paul Scott and also Nathan Scott, and he's now down to P3, and I think Maury's made a bit of a mistake somewhere as he's dropped quite a way down, and meanwhile it's the case with all this going on. We have got Lambert Wedder here in P5, who's now chasing after, well, sorry, he's being chased after by Wiggins, I should really say. And Wiggins looking for the move as Wedder goes deep into the corner. He'll look to try and get a strong exit here, but it looks like the Porsche driver Wiggins using the straight line acceleration out of corners of that Porsche to his advantage, but it's going to be the case that the Porsche is now sandwiched between the two Dutch BMWs. But remember, it is the case as well, Wiggins has got Walton just behind Wedder, and it might be the case that Walton can get involved here. Perhaps he'll be able to get his teammate involved and act as a bit of a rear guard, so that way they can clear the first of the two BMWs and then make the way after the second of them. We'll have to wait and see as they make their way out 5 up into 6, and through 6 they go here. No such achievement this time, but as we ride on board with Walton here, we can see it's the case as he emerges through turn number 6 and up towards turn 7. They come charging on through for the time being, and no changes at this point. All of them using their straight line speed to advantage, all having a bit of the toe other than what is Hammering at the head, Van Hammeren, and as a result right now I think they're all going to stay as they are as they go charging up towards the chicane once more. But as they make their way into that braking zone, and no changes at this point, but we can see how they're all concertinaing together here, and as a result this could really open things up now. As we look at the gearbox, we look at from the gearbox of Van Hammeren as they make their way out of 11 up onto 12 now, and as they come through here you can see how Wiggins trying to go a little bit high here, trying to use the overspeed early, but the BMW says no. With the amount of pace it's got here, it's going to be a very long drag race as they make their way up towards that timing line now, and you can see it's the case that Van Hammeren staying low but trying to widen the car a little bit there, trying to get the message through to Wiggins. If you're coming through, you're going to have to really brave it around the outside, and now we can see Wedder trying to come through as well. They're going to look to go 3 wide into turn 1, but in the end it calms down, but you can see how Van Hammeren's had to back off. But to be fair, Van Hammeren is an AM driver compared to the others around him being pros, so there's no need for him to fight this one. If anything, it's actually worked out. He's used his position in order to make sure that Wedder stays in the middle of the two RD Simsport drivers and that they all stay close together here, so he's made sure not to lose too much time, and he will effectively get a triple toe up onto the bank of turn 7, and that will really work to his advantage as they make their way through. But meanwhile, Dan Maury here is making a move, or trying to make the move on Nathan Scott, coming out of turn 5 and up into 6, but Maury not close enough to go for it right now, and with a slightly crumpled front end on that Porsche, it does look as though he's had a little bit of a moment earlier on in the race, and that's what's seen him drop from the lead to what is now 3.5 seconds off the leader. That's Paul Scott who's leading, it should be pointed out, and it's Maury right now who is trying to catch up once again here as they make their way through on what is lap number 5. They come charging through turn 7 and down towards 8, but what can Maury do at this point with a car that's clearly suffering from some damage? He's not closing up rapidly enough here, and I think he's lost a bit of the front aero. He's not punching as clean a hole through the air behind what is already a hole created by the Porsche in front of him, and so I think Maury's got to be patient with this one and try and play it on the strategy and use that fast repair to keep him in contention. He doesn't want to fight this right now unless Scott makes a major error of all proportions as they come through 12 and head around to complete the lap. Meanwhile, I can tell you that Walton just holding on for the time being behind Wedder and Wiggins, and again, it's all about playing the smart game right now, because these guys need to think what the fact they're coming up to 10 minutes into the race, given how the field has already dispersed. As Maury's into the pits to do repair work on the car, or is he? No, he's staying. In fact, he's gone low as Maury, and as he makes his way in, he's going to take the low line into turn 1, and Scott's not going to battle this too hard. I think he's going to look for the cut back into 1 with the tight apex, but Maury says he's here to stay, but Scott's going to look to try and come back in through 2 and up into 3. We'll have to wait and see as they make their way on through. This is the battle for P2. Maury on the outside here, Scott on the inside, but Scott not close enough, and whilst this is happening, I can tell you that Wedder has lost the place to Walton behind, and it's the case that Walton's going to go for the move here into turn 3 versus teammate as they make their way out the corner here. It's a case that the Lamborghini Huracan driver is now at the head of the pack. and will be trying to now start to make the break and bring Wiggins along with him. But Wedder will say, if I can come along as well, thank you, chaps. I really appreciate that. But I think it might be the case that the RD Sim Sport drivers have a slightly different ideas. We can see Wedder looking to sliver his nose on the inside here through turn 5, as we saw Wiggins got it a little bit deep under braking, and he's not been able to find a way through. But Wedder's going to go for the cutback here onto the inside into 6, but he's not close enough to try and go for it. But you can definitely see how the pressure's building, as we see there Walton taking a very wide exit line, getting a huge sling out the corner. But it is the case he's got to be wary of those track limits as they all emerge once again. Meanwhile, Dan Murray versus Scott. Well, Murray got ahead of Scott, but Scott's already looking to come back through, and here he comes. As they make their way down into turn number 8 here, it's going to be a battle on the brakes between the two Porsche drivers. Equal machinery, albeit one of them's a little bit damaged compared to the other. But as they make their way through the chicane, Scott regains the position and now goes charging up onto the embankment of 12. But remember, it's now the case that as they make their way on the banking, now Maury is going to come back at him, as meanwhile Walton tries to lead this pack here. But you can see Walton really starting to open up a gap versus Wiggins through the chicane here. And I think this is what Walton wanted. He wanted to take that position and then run away with it. As meanwhile, I'm hearing there's been a major incident a bit further down. That's Michael Sill, who's had a moment of all sorts going through turn 3. And I'm hearing in my ear he's got it wrong at the corner. And Gareth Mills, who's just a bit head up the road, the GM racing machine right now, as he makes his way up towards turn 5, peacefully just cruising around here. And I think Dodge Sill going a bit wrong into 3, but looking away from this and heading now back a little bit further up. We can see, meanwhile, in the battle for what is P12 here, we've got Favo versus Young, both battling in the AM class here. Young on the inside as they make their way down into turn 1, and Reece Young just flying on through here. And I think David E. Favo just has decided, you know what, I'm not going to fight this one too hard. There is no point for it. But behind, with all this, talk about fighting where there's a point for it, we've got the 3 pros here of Albanese, Janssen, and then Taylor, all squabbling for position here as they make their way down into what is turn number 3. And I can tell you that it's the 7th time of asking as they come through the corner. And Albanese, the Italian, at the head of this pack in the battle for P15. This is for what is P8 in the pro class right now. He's trying to hold on versus Janssen and Taylor, who are both trying to catch up to him. Remember, Janssen had that major moment earlier on in the race and saw him drop quite a way down the order. So as they make their way through the turn at 5 hairpin right now, it is the case that Albanese is really up against it, and it's a BMW train, albeit there's a Ferrari at the back of it. That is Stuart Taylor at the back of it. And we should correct, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, Stuart Taylor was shown as an AM in the sprint race. He's a pro driver. We've had that corrected. So as a result, he will be shown as a pro from this point onwards for all future broadcasting as they make their way out right now. But you can see the discrepancy between the cars. Unfortunately for Albanese here, he's got Jardine just ahead of him right now, and he can use Mark Jardine to give him the tow down towards the chicane once again. As meanwhile, we look back up front, and I can tell you that Scott versus Maury once again is about to go explosive as they make their way down towards what is the start-finish line here. And it is the case that Maury's going to look for this one early, but you can see Scott staying as low as possible, staying to that yellow line. And as they make their way across the timing line here, 12.5 minutes complete. There's going to be no way through this time. But I think what Maury's trying to do is trying to get so close to intimidate Scott to make a mistake into turn 1. The closer he can get, the better. But meanwhile, oh goodness me, and what has happened to Stuart Taylor here? Well, I'm hearing he's been involved in an incident with Mark Jardine. We won't be able to bring you that back, but it looks like the two drivers have been involved in one, and Jardine is literally going backwards on circuit right now. He's pointing the wrong way, and I think it's a case he's going to have to jump to the pits, and he does indeed. But whilst all this is kicking off, I can tell you that Paul Scott is peacefully just running away with the lead of this race. He is 5.6 seconds ahead of Nathan Scott and continue to open that gap up. But less about the driver who's got it peacefully, more about the drivers who've got the battles ongoing. We still do have that freeway battle for P4 overall and P4 in the pro class. Now it's Walton, Wiggins and Wedder as they make their way down towards turn 6 once again, and try saying those 3 names in contention and in a sequence as rapidly as that multiple times. I can assure you that alliteration is going to be quite difficult to say as they make their way through, but we're probably going to be saying it quite a lot more over the course of the remainder of this race because they have stayed together. But then I say that Wedder is starting to fall back a little bit here, but he does have that double toe to his advantage as they make their way down towards the chicanes once more here, and he'll completely build up that speed as they come charging on down. But meanwhile, further back, in the battle for what is the AM class, I can tell the AM class lead, it is Van Hameren who's just leading at the moment. He's used that starting position to his advantage and he's holding on to that lead. He has got a gap of what is 6.6 seconds over Mark Sykes, who you briefly saw there through the rear of your picture. Now we're focusing on the 266 driver as he makes his way through the sequence of corners, and it's Mark Baker just behind him. Of course, Mark Baker here keeping his head down with Adam Quinn just behind him, and Quinn trying to close up, but they will have Proughton getting into the mix later on. But meanwhile, we look back up towards our battle for P2, one of of the big battles of the story so far, and we can see it's the case that Maury tries to find his way through, but meanwhile Josh Wiggins here, well, he's going around the outside of Walton, and Walton trying to keep the car nice and on the inside there, trying to only let his teammate through and not let Wedder gain an advantage. So we've seen that Scott has held off Maury for the time being, but Wiggins and Walton have swapped places once again as Wedder just stays there, wedded to the back of Walton's car, and as they make their way through turn 3 and up towards turns 4 and 5 once again, I think this is really going to start to come down to the strategy right now. And notice one thing, Wedder is not doing anything to get himself heavily involved in this. He just wants to stay with the guys in front. I think what the Dutchman is trying to do right now, he's trying to pace himself to the two drivers in front. He's trying to use them to do a little bit of fuel saving. He can short shift, of course, by being in that slipstream on the straights or the curve banking, and that will work to his advantage as they make their way up into turn 6 and get ready to go onto the oval. But meanwhile, as we go out the infield for those drivers, we're still in the infield for these guys, and when I say these guys, we're talking about Stefan Albanese here, the Italian driver, who's now got a pack of amateurs who are charging after him. When I say a pack of amateurs, I mean in the class. I'm not trying to be derogatory, as they make their way through turn 5, and we can see Reece Young here and Favo just behind, and Young having a poor run there on the exit of turn 5, and as a result, this is going to enable his battler for P13 overall, P5 in the AM class of Favo to close up here. And can Davide find a way on through? I don't think so this time. He will try up on the banking if he can here to get the toe. He is close enough to potentially have a shot through the chicane and up onto 12 if he's got the momentum. But meanwhile, talking about battling once again as they make their way through 12 and head on towards another lap here, the end of lap number 9. It's Maury versus Scott once more. They're side by side, the equal machines here, but you can see Scott when he's in that clear air and he doesn't have to worry about the slipstream. It is the case, he does have that speed, and I think that is the damage on Maury's car that's just holding him back a tiny bit as they make their way down towards turn number 1, and Maury is staying with him. He is relentless, but look who's caught up in all of this. It's Wiggins, Walton and Wedder who have gradually caught up, although Wedder, to be fair, is now a second back. But I think this could work to his advantage. He won't want to be that close when we have all 4 of those drivers going toe to toe. Meanwhile, Prouting here, the pro driver, trying to siphon his way through the AMs around him as Quinn goes in very heavy on the brakes, and I think Prouting had to react there as we see Baker go deep, Quinn go deep, and Quinn not going as deep as Baker here has gained the position as all 3 drivers have to react to making mistakes around one another. And we see Baker now trying to come back as he goes a bit deep on the brakes, and there's almost a little bit, in fact there was a little bit of contact there, but Baker calms it down, as does Quinn. They both keep it cool, and Prouting comes from the inside. I think at this point there may be a few buckets of sweat in that driver's seat in terms of him thinking it could have gone catastrophic if one driver had got it a bit more wrong than the other, but he's got his way through, and now he's up into P9 overall, P7 in class, as meanwhile we look back up to the battle for what is P2, and we can see here it's the case. In fact, I say it's the battle for P2 here, and I think Scott's actually disappeared off up the road. Oh, goodness me, I think Scott has made it. No, Scott has not disappeared up the road. My apologies, Scott's just there, just misreading our timing screen. But what we're not misreading is Wiggins is going for the move here into turn 8, much like we're hearing. He went for a very strong move on the opening lap of the sprint race. He's made it count, and Wiggins is through versus Maury, and Walton now has to wait. But as we look from the gearbox here of Scott, you can see just how close Wiggins is getting here. It's Porsche versus Porsche, and then you've got the whole pack of drivers behind, all the pros going to war here at Daytona as they make their way out of 12 and on towards another lap completed, coming to the end of lap number 10. It's Wiggins on the outside, Scott on the inside as they come on down towards turn 1. They've got a long way to go before turn 1 yet, but Wiggins has got his nose ahead, and behind you can see Maury and Walton in a similar situation. Walton on the outside, he's going all the way around here. Can Walton make it count? It's brave stuff on the outside, and Walton finding the grip there and right on the threshold as they make their way through. And you can see Wedder in the BMW just behind, probably thinking to himself right now, how can I get involved in all this? I want to be in the fight as well, as they make their way through turn 3 and now head down towards 5. Goodness me, this is breathtaking stuff as they make their way up towards 4 and 5 once again. And you can see that Wiggins, having got past Scott, is now starting to make the breakaway. He's got a 7-second gap to close down to the leader, but behind, leading the pack for P3 right now is Nathan Scott. And as he emerges from turn number 5, you see he's gone a bit wide, then gone up onto the curve, the yellow curve, and now Walton's going to go round. But can he find a way all the way around the outside? The answer from Walton is he goes a little bit wide there, but I think he's just about kept him in the track limits. He may get a little bit of warning about that one. But as they make the way, coming on to 7 now, you can see Walton has had to back it off there. He lost a bit of momentum coming out the corner. And as they now make the way down towards 8, it is going to be a case of Porsche versus Lamborghini as they make the way all the way down. 2 German engines going toe-to-toe, of course. And as they come into the braking zone, we can see it's Walton ahead on the outside here. And I think Scott's got to be careful careful, because if he brakes too early, he's going to have Maury coming on through, and Wedder will also get in on the mix. And as they come out of the chicane now, it is the case that Wedder is going to be very close behind as they head up onto turn 12, and the BMW driver now has got the overspeed here versus the crippled Porsche in terms of the aerodynamics on the Porsche of Maury, but Maury has got the toe off of Scott, and you can see how much that slipstream matters here with the fact that Wedder is just gradually creeping ahead, using the speed of that BMW to his advantage, but it's such a painfully long pass. And as they make their way onto another lap under braking, you see Wedder completely putting the brakes on early and backing out of it, knowing there's no way through this time, and there's no way Maury's going to just give up the place without a fight. As meanwhile, looking back to the leader of our AM class, we can see it's Van Hameren here, who is continuing to hold firm in his position right now as he makes his way out of turn 1 and in through 2, and doing a good job as the Dutchman. He has got Sykes, who's gradually closing on him, although Sykes has had to deal with a little bit of traffic, we believe, and in fact Sykes has not had the best of laps recently. Van Hameren on that last lap of 46.1, Sykes a 46.6, so Sykes actually losing half a second on Van Hameren, and if the Dutchman can keep it up right now, he could be on with a fantastic result. But with all this happening, I am hearing that Adam Quinn has had a moment at turn 3 by looks of things, and he's dropped down to P12 overall. That is P4 in the AM class, and Favo and Janssen right now battling here. But remember, Favo does not need to battle with Janssen. Janssen in the different class, but of course some drivers may not be aware of who's in their class and who's not, and that's the thing they've got to figure out over the course of the season as early as possible. As Janssen looks at a move, but Favo in the end says no and blocks it on the inside eventually by just cutting across their nose. And as they make their way through, I think Janssen was trying to just get a little bit of his nose in to try and intimidate Favo, but it's the case that Davide says no and instead presses on as they now make their way through turn 6 and up onto the bank once again. But looking from these guys to a bit further down, some drivers who really have had a race not to tell stories about. It is the case that right now Stuart Taylor, after righting the car and doing the repair work with that fast repair, of course, he's down in P24 right now, and in terms of his lap times, he is putting in solid laps, 45s, mid 45s, lap after lap right now. He is going hunting. He's P14 in the Pro class, P24 overall. He can come back and get involved in this race. It's not as though he's out of it yet. He won't be on course to take the win, but he could still get some good points. As meanwhile, it is the case Walton has just got past Wiggins in the run down towards turn at number 1 once again, and behind Lambert, Wedder has got through versus Maury here. We just caught the end of it as they've made their way through, but it is the case that Wedder right now trying to hold on to that position, and he's trying to chase after Scott, Wiggins and Walton. But the problem is with all the battling that's going on there, and that is Sykes, that is Elwin Sykes who's having to move out of the way, who's a lap down right now and doing so in a rather peaceful manner, just staying wide at turn 3 and letting everybody else get the good run out of 3 up towards 5 compared to himself. But you can see how these drivers all want to stay together in the hunt for P2, but now that Walton and Wiggins have got themselves into formation, I suspect they're going to try and do what they did in the sprint, which is make the break, work together to make that break. And already you can see the evidence, ladies and gentlemen, they're 2 seconds ahead, and now as they go up onto the banking, it's going to be the case that Nathan Scott, who is in P4, essentially is going to be at the head of the pack in the slowest car of the pack of the BMW and Porsches, and it's Wedder who wants to be really at front and give the Porsches the ability to catch up and switch places over the course of the runs through 7 and 12. We'll wait and see how that plays out, but right now it's quite a spaced out field here with everybody starting to play to their strategies. And we look at Walton and Wiggins, right, and they make their way down into 8. No change at this time, but this is how it all starts to build up, and now the strategy element really starts to kick in. Remember, none of what is our top 15 have made pit stops yet. It is the case that our top 15 have yet to pit, and really they're the drivers who've not been involved in any major instance, it should be said. So we are waiting to see who is going to blink first on the strategy stakes. And speaking of blinking first here, I think it's the case that Wedder's going to blink and try and go around the outside of Scott in the run through 12 and down onto turn 1. They're 23 minutes into the hour, and as they come across towards the timing line here, you can see how Wedder has got that overspeed, but it's such a long run, and that's the problem. He's come out too early on this run, and as they make the way into 1 once again, he has to back off here. He can't find a way all the way around. He hasn't got enough of the car ahead to essentially force the claim to the apex, and as a result, he has to now wait for that opportunity. And this, of course, presents Maury an opportunity to close up to the back. And we ride on board with Dan Maury as they make their way through turn number 3. And you can see all 3 drivers taking very different lines through what is the hairpin of turn 3, where we saw Maury taking a very tight line, Wedder in the middle of the road, and Scott a wide line to get that exit and get on the power. But as they make their way through 4 and up into 5 and come down heavy on the brakes once again here, you can see how Scott is going very defensive. In fact, he goes so tight to the inside, he almost misses the corner. He has to park the car on the apex here. And Wedder at this point, I think, will be salvaged salivating at the prospect of trying to get a move on, and Maury as well. Now Maury, if he plays this right, he could have an opportunity at a 2-for-1 special as they make the way from 6 and up onto 7. But the problem for Maury, of course, is he needs to wait for the opportune moment. As we can see off in the distance there, Walton and Wiggins just disappearing. But as they all come around once again, now Maury has to play the patience game, knowing he hasn't got the speed here to close up compared to the drivers around them, as they make the way all the way round once again and head down towards turn number 8. And as they continue to charge all the way down here, we look to you guys and girls in the chat, and we can see Craig Pearce there in the Twitch chat saying he's enjoying the racing so far. And see, have you seen Walton in his Lambo? He is overtaking harder than Hamilton. Well, indeed, it is fantastic to see that. And be sure to let me know what you guys and girls are thinking so far as this race opens up a bit. And speaking of things not opening up, meanwhile, we've got Reece Young here, who I think's had a little bit of a moment, and he's gone off circuit, or something's happened to Reece Young because he's fallen very far back from Kirk right now. And in fact, Reece Young in P6 in class right now, P16 overall, but he has fallen back to Hobson. As meanwhile, we can see once again Wedder versus Scott here as they make their way down towards 1, but no change this time around as they come on through. And meanwhile, as they make their way down, we can hear that Favo Favo, I should say, making his way through what is turn number 12 right now. And as he comes on through, and no changes for him. He is chasing after Janssen, who is in the alternative class and the pro class compared to him as they make their way down. But meanwhile, I am hearing that Hobson has passed Young. And in fact, Young has had an off on circuit. He's had a run off circuit coming through what was turn number 10, 11. And it does look as though Reece Young is battling with a problem on that car. He does not look happy in that Ferrari. And this is a shame because it was going well for Reece Young, but he's dropped places. He's dropping like a stone right now. Stefan Vessels and Hobson have both come on through. And I think he's picked up damage on the front left-hand, well, front right-hand side from his perspective. We see it on the front left from our camera perspective. It does look as though the tracking and the suspension on that front right-hand wheel are damaged. And you can see under rain, he just cannot get the car to turn through. He can't get it to steer into the corner. And I think for Young, he might have to consider coming into the pit soon in order to get that repaired, because that is a car that is not going to go much longer without him losing a massive amount of time. But we will wait and see. As meanwhile, we look here to the battle for what is P4 once again here. Wedder versus Scott. And Wedder's going to go for it this time on the inside into turn 8. He's found an opportunity here to do it earlier, and I think he's going to go for it. He's gone to the inside. He's taken the position. Now, can he make the break out the chicane and the run through 12? This is the big challenge factor here as we ride on board the gearbox of the BMW M4 of Wedder. And as he makes it out the corner, you can see Scott is falling back towards Maury right now. Scott will gradually gain here. He's gaining by approximately a couple hundredths every second. And as they make their way up towards the timing line right now to go on to lap number 16, you can see Maury looking for the move, but instead Maury comes into the pits here. And I think Maury's played this one smart. He's taking it as far as he can right now, but he needs to think about the strategy and how he gets himself ahead of this pack, alternatively into the fight as they make their way into 1 here. Wedder versus Scott, and Scott staying with him, Nathan Scott, but not able to find a way through it as Wedder just keeps that car planted right now and makes his way up towards turn number 3. But with Maury into the pits, it will be the case. We'll have to wait and see where he comes out in all of this as Matthew Proughton now comes through to take what is P7 overall, P6 in class, and as he makes his way through turn 1 and into 2, we can see a number of drivers coming on through the sequence of corners here, and it does look as though Prouting doing everything right so far. It's been quite an eventful race for Prouting. Well, at least the sprint race was very eventful. This one's been a little bit less eventful, it should be said, albeit at the start where he's had to make some bold moves, but he has gained some positions as Prouting. He's gained 5 positions since the start, and as a result now he'll be pressing on as much as he possibly can as he makes his way down towards turn number 5 once again. As he comes on through the corner right now, it's one of the situations where the next driver in his sights is 12.5 seconds up the road, or almost 13 seconds. That is Nathan Scott, but he's a long way away. And Prouting at this point has just got to dig deep and keep his head down. As meanwhile, looking a bit further down the field in terms of all those pit stops playing out, we can see that Gareth Mills, meanwhile, who has already made 1 stop, I think that was to repair damage quite early on in the race, he's now pressing on. And in fact, we're talking about pit stops, where has Maury come out in? You may ask you, well, he's come out in P13, and he's come out just ahead of Adam Quinn. Now the P13 translates into P9 in the pro class here as he makes his way up into turn 6, but in terms of his nearest targets right now, he has got Alistair Kirk just ahead of him, the best part of what is 3.8 seconds up the road, and that's something for Maury which you'll have to think about here. But he hasn't really come out amongst other drivers here who he can use to try and gain some time, and this is the problem. He's brought himself out in clear air, which you would argue in most circuits would be fantastic. Clear air, you've got nobody to hold you up. But here, when you need somebody to give you that extra top speed, particularly in the Porsche 911 on the straight, then for Maury, it's now a case, effectively, he's got to try and make all the time up versus his rivals in the battle for the top 5 of the pro class. He's got to make it all up through the infield section where there's corners. And that's the problem. The more time you gain is in the slipstream. And as we were hearing from some of our drivers in the Apex Racing Academy earlier on this week, it is the case you gain almost a second if you get it right. And you can see this is already happening in the hands of Adam Quinn here in the Lamborghini Huracan, who's going to go for a move here versus Maury. Now, this is going to be painful for Maury because if Quinn commits to the move here, which he's entitled to, even though they're not in the same class, if Quinn commits this, what it will mean for Maury effectively is that he will lose time. And you can see Maury having to go very defensive, but he goes over deep into turn 1 under braking, and as a result, Quinn takes the position, and this is going to severely hurt Maury right now, who will probably be thinking, I'm not fighting you, let me go. But then again, they may not know they're not meant to be fighting. Well, when I say they're not meant to be fighting one another, they can fight as much as they want, but they're not fighting for points when they battle one another like this. They're fighting for overall position and bragging rights as they make their way through turn 4. And you see Quinn holds the inside versus Maury here. Now, can Maury do something special under oh, goodness me, and Maury tapping the back of Quinn there as they make their way into the corner by looks of things. And I think that might be a little bit of word to get a move on, but he's going to have to calm that down, is Maury, if that was contact, as we saw from the camera, because that is not going to be a way to go about it. And we might see both drivers end up on the grass in the near future as they make their way through turn number 6 and up into 7. I think Maury may have misanticipated the brake in there versus Quinn, to be fair. Different brakes on the cars. We do know the brakes in that Porsche are very strong compared to the Huracan, and it may be the case that he just simply mistimed his braking point, which can happen. I've been there myself in the driving seat when I've got it wrong, gone straight into the back of someone on weaker brakes, and I can tell you it's an embarrassing thing to do when you're in a high intensity race and you've got to tell the stewards about it afterwards. But as they make their way through the chicane here, it's the case that they stay nose to tail and no changes at the moment. As meanwhile, we are here, well, in fact, no changes. It is the case that Maury's going to go for the move here as they make their way up onto the bank of turn 12, and this time I think Maury's going to try and get it done. You can see there Quinn waiting to drop himself back in, but he's got too much speed to drop in, and if Quinn wanted to come back at this, what he needs to do is lift off the throttle very slightly, just take it off by about 5 to 10%, drop his speed by about 3-4 miles an hour, tuck in behind, and then go back. But I think at this point what Quinn is going to do is simply stay there and stay on the outside as Maury takes the position back, and we can see Arish Young there starting to make his way out of the pits with a wounded car that has been repaired. He did come into the pits with a heavily wounded car, we're hearing, and now we can see that Maury up the position into P13 at long last. But going from these guys up to Matthew Proutin right now, we can see a batting with Van Hameren right now. And as they make their way through turn 6 and up into 7, again, another situation here where Proutin will want to gain as much as he possibly can versus the drivers around him. And he will have Van Hameren giving the tow here, to be fair. And two very fast cars, identical cars, of course. Remember, these are fixed setups. They are the medium setups on both cars. And we see Proutin going for the move in. Van Hameren's not going to fight this one too hard. I think both drivers have started to get that sort of psychological thought process of, if I use the guy to give me the speed on the straights, if I use his slipstream, but Proutin gets it very wrong there on the exit of the chicane. He's got to be careful as he emerges from the corner. In fact, you can see Van Hameren already coming out here to make the return. In fact, he's trying to bleed some of the speed off the car to make sure he doesn't end up battling with Proutin, I'd say, Van Hameren, as they make their way down towards the start line to go on to lap number 19. Meanwhile, with all this happening, what's happening further up the road? Well, I can tell you it's the case that Scott has just come out of the pit. Well, no, he's not come out of the pits. In fact, he has just gained the place on Wedder. We didn't quite catch that on camera into turn 1, but he's made the place on Wedder, and he is now into P4. But for how long is the question? How long can he do it as he makes his way up towards 5? Because remember, he may be in the lead right now of this little battle, but once they get up onto turn 7, it could change very quickly in the run down towards turns 8 through to 11, as we've seen time and time again. And Scott there taking a little bit of a defensive line into turn 5, just trying to get his intent through, I think, to what is Wedder to say to him, look, I don't want to particularly battle with you, but we will wait and see how they play out as they make their way around once again and head up onto the embankment. As they come through, it's one of those situations where as they come charging on through, no changes at this point in time as they make their way on round. But as they come through the corners, I can tell you that pressing on as much as they possibly can, it's Scott trying to hold that position for the time being. And as he does so here, it's one of those situations where I think for Nathan Scott, he just needs to keep pushing as much as he possibly can. And if he does so, it's one of those situations where it will work out for him. As we just get a brief update there on our timing screen and some slight things being changed as we go, as we can see those timings updated, and Jardine getting ahead of Young further down, but Young I think having a run off the circuit. But talking about what's happening on screen right now, the battle between these two pros, Scott and Wedder right now. Wedder trying to find a way on through here, but again both of them I think conscious of the fact the more battling they do, the more likely Maury's going to get back in on this. But of course they won't know. Scott comes into the pits here, and this is critical in terms of the placement of the different drivers. We see Wedder coming down towards turn number 1 under braking, but the reason this is critical is because where is Maury in all of this? They won't have known that Maury had the challenge with Quinn to deal with. Well, Maury's just making his way through the chicane right now. He's a long way back. If he's able to gain the place, it will be quite the achievement as they make their way on through, but we will wait and see as they come charging up on the banking here, and as Maury continues to make his way round right now. What are they doing with Nathan Scott's car, you may be asking? Well, he's right on the end of the pit lane, and we can see they're not changing the tyres. They are simply putting the fuel in the car here. So as we can see Maury making his way around and down towards the timing line, we're going to wait and find out what is going to happen, but I do think it may be the case that Maury's going to come out ball. Nathan Scott, in fact, has just left his pit box. So where is Nathan Scott? You can see he's making his way through the corner to exit the pit lane as he grazes the wall there, and that may really hurt Scott in terms of the aerodynamic damage that he picks up. And we can see behind Maury's going to come out alongside, and Maury in fact comes out ahead of Scott, with Scott having that moment exiting the pits. It has been a very short delta in the end, only a delta of a second, and I think it was all caused by hitting the wall on the pit exit, and Maury has made this one work. He has not let the battling with Quinn hold him back. Now can Maury, the Altitude Esports driver, do it once again as he makes his way up into turn 5? Can he also gain on Wedder right now, who will be aware of this? He will see on his timing screens, most likely, in board the car alternative, his crew chief will be telling him that Maury has found a way past Scott, and he will need to react sooner rather than later, because if he doesn't, it could be curtains for Wedder in terms of being back ahead of Maury or being in that fight. As meanwhile, our race leader of Paul Scott has set his personal best. It's not the fastest lap of the race, I can tell you that. It's Walton and Wiggins who are exchanging and battling for fastest lap. A 44.58 from Walton behind Wiggins at 44.65. These two are absolutely flying by comparison, it has to be said. Although I do say that, I do actually think it's Maury who holds the fastest lap. I should correct myself there, on a 44.54. So these guys are very close to it, but it's the case that Maury further down. We got that fastest lap much earlier on in the race with all the slipstream being in effect, but as these guys make their way down towards turn 5 right now, Walton and Wiggins will be aware of the fact that the pack behind are not too far away, and they will need to time their strategy accordingly in order to make sure they get a good result come the end of this one as they come on through. Meanwhile, looking further down the order, I can see it Stefan Albanese right now closing up to the back of Mark Baker, and I think Baker's not going to fight this one too hard with Albanese coming out of nowhere, a huge amount of pace here, and he goes very tight to the apex there at turn 8, a bit tight for the liking of perhaps Baker, who feel he's going to lose momentum. But we'll wait and see as they mark their way through. Mark Sykes into the pits from what was P2 in the AM class, and that was P10 overall. As we can see, Albanese has got the move done on Baker here. Now he's got to go chasing after Stock. As meanwhile, further down the order, I can tell you that Gareth Mills here chasing after Reece Young. Well, in fact, he's backing off the throttle here, Gareth Mills. I'm wondering if that's either a slowdown or something's a bit wrong with that Porsche 911. It looks okay. I think he might have just picked up a slowdown there as Mark Sykes still in the pits, it should be pointed out. And meanwhile, our leader in the AM class right now is Adam Quinn, although he has yet to pit, so we would imagine that it's Rinus van Hammeren who is our leader in the AM class when the pit stops play out, but we'll have to wait and see. But what we can see right now is that Quinn is still forming a little bit of a rolling roadblock for Scott, and Scott I think needs to time this one, as we can see our leaders all into the pits right now, all three of them in sequence here. So Walton and Wiggins going together to stay together out on circuit, and Scott ahead of them. But remember now, it all comes down to how quickly they can make this pit stop as they make their way on through. And meanwhile, Prouting here coming around. He's yet to pit as well as Matthew Prouting. Will we see Prouting dive into the pits, or will he take the lead for a brief period of time? I think he's coming. I think he's taking that fuel tank as far as he possibly can. I think we are starting to see the end game in terms of pit stops. But meanwhile, Maury here, the first driver of the leaders to really pit. Well, he's not getting involved in all of this. But meanwhile, what I can tell you is they emerge in the pits here. Scott is still in his pit box. Well, he's just emerging right now. He's just come out ahead. But the gap between Scott and Walton has closed down considerably here as he exits the pit lane, and Walton and Wiggins were slightly faster stop, and of course they've been able to fuel save, whereas Scott has had to run this one on his own tank and own impetus. And what it means is right now Scott's had to take on extra fuel compared to Walton and Wiggins, and as they make their way out right now, we can also see Lambert Wedder coming out the pits. Alistair Kirk is going to be in the middle of this, albeit he's already had a pit stop as the TGC racing driver as he makes his way through turn number 3. And I think for Kirk it's one of those situations where he's going to be in amongst this now. Does he have another pit stop to have to play out? We'll wait and see. But Maury in all of this as he emerges behind Wedder, well, he has lost out to a brief degree as we're hearing that Quinn has come into the pits, which releases Nathan Scott. Nathan Scott at the back of all this, and Nathan Scott has lost out massively in all of the pit window right now. He has gone to be at the back of the hunt for what is effectively P4, and P4 once Kirk comes into the pits. If he is due another pit stop, which we believe he is, but we may be wrong on that. But this has been a disaster for Scott, coming out behind Quinn. Maury's jumped him, and Wedder has got out ahead of the pair of them, so it's worked out for Wedder massively. But meanwhile, further down the order, we can see here we've got the South African of Stefan Wessels battling with what is, I believe that's Favo, just ahead of him right now in the identical livery cars as they make the way out to what is turn number 3 and head up towards turn 5. It's Wessels chasing after Favo, and as they come up towards the turn 4 kink, you can see it's the case that both drivers committed. Now can Wessels send it down the inside here? He's had some bad luck over the course of the season opener so far in the sprint race, with that phenomenal qualifying being undermined in the end by an incident that he just got collected in after lap 1, going on to lap number 2. But as they now make their way down towards turn number 6, can the Ferrari driver get one up on his fellow Ferrari counterpart in the AM class of Favo, or will it be the case that the driver ahead of him has got too much in the tank? We'll have to wait and see. We've still got 20 minutes of this race to go. Anything can happen, of course, as we ride on board here with Wessels. Now, of course, going through his mind at this point, what this being his debut in racing in the championship and racing on iRacing, really, he'll be thinking to himself right now, okay, it's all a big learning experience. And that's the thing about the AM class. We've got some drivers who are veterans but just do not have the pace of the pros. Other drivers we've got who are quite rookie in their nature, and then we've got the in-betweeners. But we can see here Wessels here, really, whilst he is a rookie, trying to learn as rapidly as possible here and showing his aptitude for going racing. We'll have to wait and see, as we're hearing that Gareth Williams and also Stock are into the pits in their respective positions. And Wessels right now closing on Fave as they make their way down towards turn 1, but they've got a long way to go. They're going to go side by side here in the long run as they come up towards the timing line. Here's Wessels on the outside, then we've got Favo on the inside, and as they make their way through the corner and head down towards 1, it does look as though Wessels is going to go all the way round, but under braking, can he seal the door shut? He does indeed, and gains the place in a textbook move that takes him up to P13 overall and what is P3 in class as he goes charging on. His next target is Mark Baker, who is 7.5 seconds up the road, a very long way away, it should be said right now, and with 20 minutes to go, or really 19.5 minutes plus the overtime, it will be the case that Wessels has got a lot to do if he wants to catch up to the leaders in the AM class. But meanwhile, looking to the leaders in the pro class, we can see in the battle for P5 here, Maury on the outside, Wedder on the inside, under braking into the chicane. They go too wide but settle it back into an order, but you can see Maury now wants to get a move on here. He's got clear of Scott, who's nowhere with this pack. He's 4.3 seconds down is Scott, and he won't be gaining him because he hasn't got anybody to give him the toe on the straights. But what it does mean for Maury is he's going to get closer and closer, and he's going to look high as they make the way out to 12 and head down towards the start finish line. Wiggins sets the fastest lap at 44.4, just a little bit further up the road right now. Wiggins and Walton chasing after what is Scott, and they are only 1 to 2 seconds off the back of our race leader. But focusing on Maury here, he goes round the outside as they go into another lap. Can he commit it under the brake? In the Altitude Sports driver does, and he closes the door there as he takes the position off a Wedder. A nice move there, much like what we saw from Wessels versus Father only moments ago, but a bit tighter to that apex between the two pros, and you can see the great respect between the two of them as they make their way through it. And Alistair Kirk into the pits with that pit stop that we thought was coming, and that releases Prouting up into what is P7 here. And I think Prouting at this point will be very happy with the performance he's putting in so far, and will continue to try and do his best to keep this going as he makes his way through turn number 3. And Stefan Albanese right now in all of this, well, he's coming through turn number 1 right now, and we can see it's the case that he's come out ahead of Kirk as well. But to be fair, Kirk going as long as he has, and having made that second stop, Alistair Kirk has actually gained considerably, and quite respectfully, he's up into P11 overall and P9 in class. And we're looking at the TGC racing driver right now as he makes his way out of turn 3, and it's worked out very well for Kirk as he's ahead of Janssen, who is a further 4.5 seconds or so behind him, or 4.8 seconds to be exact, as they make their way up towards turn number 5. But meanwhile, our leaders now, we can see it's the case that Paul Scott at this point, with 17.5 minutes to go, he's in a situation where he'll be battling with Walton. Now, will he be battling with Walton for the rest of the race? You can imagine Scott at this point will be thinking, okay, it hasn't worked in terms of being able to just lead this race to the finish line on race pace alone. I've got to do something now, and I've got to try and find a way to work with my competitor. And we can in fact see that Wiggins has already dropped back 1.2 seconds back off the leaders as Walton raises the bar on the fastest lap to a 44.364. And as they make their way into turn 1, the battling starts now with Scott taking that defensive line. line. Oh, goodness me, we can see Walton's got it very wrong. And I think he just simply got on the power too soon behind at the back of the driver ahead of him. And that is what has kicked it all off as we see Walton making his way through what is now turn Wiggins making his way through turn 2. But I think Walton got caught out there massively by how slow Scott came out of the apex. And it's dropped Walton all the way down to what is P5 at this point in time as he now makes his way up towards turn number 3 once again here. And it should be saying RD Simsport next to his name down the bottom left. We have got a little bit of glitch there. We'll fix that next time. But Walton making a bit of a mistake. And that is unfortunate for the RD Simsport driver, who will now look to go again. As meanwhile, Lamont Wedder in all of this is chasing after Maury right now. And this opens things up considerably as they come on through turn number 5 and up towards 6. And you can see just ahead of Maury, he has got Tack, who is a lap down, of course. Liam Tack in the AM class there. P13 in the AM class, P27 overall. And he will be helping Wedder out. Well, not Wedder out. He'll be helping Maury out considerably here. Wedder's not close enough to capitalise on this double toe situation. As we do see Liam Tack meanwhile making his way all the way down. And moving out of the way and then going higher up on the bank here to effectively give the space to Maury on the inside. And Maury's going to take that and then returning kind of favour by putting the car in front as they go under braking on the racing line into the chicane once more. And as they come charging through, Tack doing everything right now to just stay out of the way of the fighting. You can see there Wedder catching up to the back of the back marker a little bit too rapidly there through the chicane. In fact, he's backed off and he wants to get the extra toe here on the run up through 12. And now he'll make the move with Wedder, but he's lost out a lot of time through this. He's lost. That gap has opened up from what was 0.6 of a second to almost 1.5 seconds come the time they get to that start finish line. And that is the pain of catching the driver at the wrong time when you're going up onto the oval as they make their way through onto another lap here. But whereas Paul Scott's been able to hold on to the lead versus Walton, I can tell you he's got Wiggins closing up to the back of him right now, the next gen racing driver, as he makes his way through 3 and up towards 5. And as we ride on board and look back here from Paul Scott, we can see how Wiggins not close enough at this time. He'll be trying to use that Porsche's advantages on the straights in order to close on the exits, I should say, of corners onto the short straights in the infield section to close up. It'll be on the run up onto the banking, and the long straights or long curves is where Scott will try to break away from Wiggins. But you can see Wiggins has nested himself very close behind Scott already, and with 15 minutes remaining, now it's a case, can Wiggins find a way on through, or does he wait until the very end and just save some fuel here and give himself the ability to rev the car out much more towards the end of the race, use all of the rev range as they make their way around through turn number 7 once again. But no closure at this point. It is going to be some time, we reckon, as they make their way down towards turn 8 once again. And we look to the exterior cameras right now as they come charging on down towards the corners here. And it's the case, Scott leading in the pro class, but for how long can he hold off Wiggins? Can he do it to the end, or will he have a strategy up his sleeve as he catches up to the back of Quinn here as they make their way up onto turn number 12 right now? And Quinn, to be fair, staying rather straight right now and just keeping it simple. And I think Scott will benefit from this, as will Wiggins behind. Both drivers will now try to gradually make their way past the back marker, but you can see here how Scott coming out quite early in order to slipstream his way through, and the fact that Quinn not backing off here is enabling Wiggins to close up massively, and they're going to look to go potentially 3 wide here into turn 1. This is going to be quite an awkward situation. We saw something like this happen in the Apex Racing Academy lobby, and Wiggins goes to move on the inside here, using the back marker essentially to give him the room and give him the speed. And you can see Paul Scott is not happy, that flashing his lights. And I think Paul Scott will feel at this point he's been heavily inconvenienced by Quinn, who just hasn't given the time or space a day. But you can see Quinn now moving out of the way. I think he's woken up and realised, goodness me, actually these are the leaders coming charging through, or he just didn't feel safe enough to give the space until turn 3. Of course, that could be a thing, a little bit of nervousness. I'm not going to put any words in the mouth of Quinn as they make their way down towards turn number 5 right now, but Scott has lost out considerably, and Wiggins using a back marker there to give him a nice cushion into the corner. I mean, it went the other way in terms of a couple of days ago in the Apex Racing Academy lobby, there was a driver who tried to tuck in on the low line into turn 1 behind a back marker, expecting to be safe on that low line, and they lost out massively under braking. But it's not to be today. Wiggins has played this one smart, and can he make the break? That's the question. As meanwhile, Alistair Kirk here chasing after Stefan Albanese, and the TGC racing driver here of Kirk is charging after the BMW driver. He's closed up quite rapidly. That last lap of 44.98 versus Albanese on a 46.1. That's the best part of 1.3 seconds being gained in a single lap. And whilst you would say there was probably a bit of slipstream in that lap by Kirk, Kirk is absolutely flying, but he's going to fly into the back of Albanese if he doesn't now that braking point, which he just about dodged it there, came in a bit too deep. And as they make their way up towards turn 6 right now, you can see that Kirk really trying to get that move on versus Albanese in order to get another position, get himself up into P8 in the Pro class and what would be P9 overall. But both drivers having decent races in this feature race. It should be pointed out, Kirk, of course, has made 2 pit stops compared to Albanese's 1. So Kirk right now really is doing the best he can as a recovery drive in order to get back into this one as they make their way down towards turn 8 here. Will Kirk look for the move? Will he? Oh, it's the case Albanese goes defensive. He thinks Kirk's going to go for it, and Kirk's going to look to the outside here. Now, how will they play it out under braking? You can see Albanese goes very deep under braking, and Kirk just takes it on through there, and Albanese, with what was a very difficult situation, going very defensive on the inside into turn 8, and Kirk has just simply come on through and is now saying thank you very much and charging off into the distance. Alistair Kerr up to P9, Stefan Albanese down to P10 as they make their way on through. And meanwhile, 2 drivers very close together as well. Wiggins versus Scott here, and it is Porsche versus BMW. And how in season 1 we talked so much about the dynamic between these 2 cars and how they were very evenly matched with their unique differences. And it is the case that between these 2 right now, you have to say that Wiggins versus Scott, one Scott is arguably in the car that's perhaps more favourable for the circuit. They're both putting their utmost here in order to do what they can to take that win, and both drivers are very strong as Albanese's had another run off circuit we're hearing. He's back in P10 once again, but he has had a run off around the circuit as meanwhile we continue to watch Wiggins versus Scott here, and Scott trying to close up once again, which he will naturally do so, but when does he go for it? We've still got just over 10 minutes to go of racing here, and I do think for the purposes of how they're battling right now, it's one of those situations whereby Scott has to be patient, and Wiggins as well will be doing every little bit of analysis he can from now to the final 5 minutes of this race. He'll be looking at Scott in his rearview mirror and thinking, okay, where's Scott faster than me? Where does he get the speed out of the corners? Where does he gain on me besides the slipstream? Where do I need to nullify his advantages? Where can I park the car on the apex? Where can I not? That's what will be going through the mind of Wiggins. Meanwhile, in Scott's mind, he'll be looking at Wiggins and thinking, okay, where's Wiggins stronger than me? Well, it's the case that right now they're looking into turn 1, and Scott's going to be thinking, okay, Wiggins is happy to take the high line there to widen the corner and block me trying to go around the outside. That's fair enough. I've got to be aware of that. I'm going to have to try and send it into turn 1 if I'm going to make it work. It's all those little things right now. They're learning about one another as they're chasing and pursuing, alternatively trying to break away. And in Wiggins' case, he's going to need as much information as he can get, as Scott right now will be looking to bare his fangs and try to sink his teeth into that win as we look further down the order once again. And talking about drivers who haven't really talked about too much, Darren Doherty here, all the way down in P28 right now. The Altitude Esports driver has had a day to forget of the races, it's definitely worth saying. But at the same time, he is soldiering on here as he closes up to the back of what is Van Hameren. And of course, Doherty and Van Hameren both in the same class, but a lap down is Doherty. He'd love to be battling with Van Hameren, but in the end, he can only close up and hope he can get through. If he is a bit faster in terms of overall pace versus the driver ahead of him, then he may be able to unlap himself. It's going to be challenging here, given the fact that once they come up onto the bank, and of course they have that slipstream factor, and the blue flags will wave furiously if Doherty is the lead driver out of the 2 of them, as the Irishman continues to close up to the back of Van Hameren and tries to find a way on through, or try to get the message through. Look, if you can go a little bit faster please, I do have a bit more pace, but I know I've got to respect the blue flags as they make their way down towards turn number 5 and through the apex here. But with these guys battling right now further up the road, I should say, we've got Michael Seal here as he makes his way around through the embankment of turn number 12 and down towards that start-finish line once again here to go on for what for him will be his 29th lap of the circuit, and doing a little bit of a weave there across the line. I think for Seal at this point may be the case of just trying to get some temperature in the tyres, not happy with the condition of the car and perhaps expressing it, as meanwhile back up front I can tell you that in the battle for the lead, Wiggins versus Paul Scott are just closing up gradually to Young, Jardine and Seal, and as they come through turn number 1 once again, this battle is not going away anytime soon. It is the closest battle out on circuit, and we will stay with it for the majority of the remaining time unless it intensifies further down the field, if you don't mind us doing so, ladies and gentlemen, because right now this is getting very close, and it could be the case that we might be seeing 2 of the Titans for the Pro Championship in what is the Coach Day Academy lobby going toe-to-toe very early on today. Of course, Paul Scott having a difficult race number 1 in terms of what was the sprint race, and as a result he started quite far up the field, whereas it's the case Look for Wiggins starting all the way towards the back. He's just decided, you know what, to go fully for it, fully commit for it, and it is working out for Wiggins right now as he makes his way through turn number 6 and up into 7. But can he hold on? And speaking of drivers are holding on right now, it will be the... Oh, goodness me! And we just look over to talk about Nigel Stock, and he's been involved in a major incident there, and I think that is the car of what was that Jardine that he was in that instant with? No, that's not Jardine. That was a Ferrari that he was involved in the instant with, but Stock has been involved in a major incident, and that's Favo there as he was looking to get through versus Favo in 2 different classes here, but Stock having a moment with Favo as they came through the chicane, and goodness me, that Ford GT does not look to be a happy car anymore, and neither does the Ferrari of Favo. But both of them coming together, and that is going to be one that's going to frustrate the pair of them. I think they'll both be looking at one after the race and thinking about what they could have done to avoid it, what the other driver could have done to avoid it, as we see here. Both, well, it's the case, Favo into the pits, Stock staying out, but meanwhile, staying alive and staying fighting right now. We can see a flash of lights there from Paul Scott, I think trying to intimidate or at least distract Wiggins, but Wiggins defends the inside here as they go on to lap number 31. They've got traffic ahead, and Jardine, that's not going to make it easy for Wiggins, who wants to navigate his way round the outside whilst defending versus Scott here, and this is a very uncomfortable situation, as you can see that Jardine's just really got nowhere to go as he emerges on the corner, and it has not held Wiggins whatsoever. I think that might have been a heart and mouth moan, and I think at that point Scott was probably hoping whether he could gain through the back marker just simply being a nuisance, but neither driver was really going for it. In fact, Scott's lost out quite considerably there on the exit of turn 3. He's dropped down to what is almost 8 tenths back as they make their way through the corners, and as they come charging up towards turn number 5 and through the corner right now, it's one of those situations where they continue to press on and do everything they can. I mean, particularly Scott, he needs to close back up right now and do so quite rapidly, because if he's going to let this gap open up anymore, particularly when they catch up to the next pair of back markers, which is Stock and Seal, who are only a little bit further up the road. Stock is only 3.7 seconds up the road from these guys. That could be a huge problem, but to be fair, Stock with a wounded car, that may also have a factor in how this all plays out in terms of them passing the back markers as they make their way down towards the turn 8 chicane once again. Meanwhile, further down the field, I can tell you that with everything happening, Gareth Mills is closing up on Elwyn Sykes in the battle for P21. That's P8 in the AM class right now. Here is Mills, and you can see Elwyn Sykes at the front of the picture as we ride on board with Mills as he charges. He's going to look for the move here as they make the way up onto the run into turn 1. He's going to go all the way around the outside here as we look to the exterior camera. It's Mills on the outside, it's Sykes on the inside here, and Mills is going to go for it to break it. Oh, goodness me. And I think it's the case that both drivers there could have just been a little bit more spacious with one another, but still it is one of those situations where they'll learn from that, as meanwhile, with 5 minutes remaining and counting down, we can see it's the situation right now where Wiggins continues to hold on for as long as he can as he makes his way down towards turn number 1, and we can see that we have got the car of what is Stefan Vessels coming out the pits there down in P17, a lap down now on the leaders, as meanwhile we see our P1 P2 battle continue as they charge in towards turn number 3 once again. 4.5 minutes remain. I can imagine that Wiggins right now must be counting down the clock in the cockpit of that car and thinking to himself, why can't the time go faster? And Scott right now is probably thinking, why can't time slow down? Why can't I get a couple more extra laps to do this? I need the time. Or has he already got it in mind how he's going to do it? That's the big question, of course. Perhaps he's just been waiting for that opportunity, and really he'll look to do it on the final lap. If he wants to nail it, he'll look to do it on the very last lap for the simple reason and he doesn't give Wiggins the opportunity to come back at him. Or will Wiggins try and do something in order to stir that? Will he perhaps try and lose the position to Scott and then try and get it back right at the end? Something you can do so long as you're not trying to intentionally block another driver, of course, or drive dangerously, as we have seen in series real world and also simulated world, where drivers give up the position in a slipstream battle only to get it back right at the end. We'll have to wait and find out, of course, as this is continued to be the closest battle on circuit. Although I say that Rhys Young right now gradually closing up to the back of Gareth Mills, but he has got a 7/10 of a second window to close down as they make their way down towards turn 8. You can't quite see Gareth Mills on camera right now, but I can assure you he's just a little bit out the road, and there he is as he appears in the front of the camera now as they make their way into turn 8, and Rhys Young continuing to charge after Mills as they come through the sequence of corners and head around. But with 3 minutes to go, we look away from this battle for what is P23 back to our leaders right now as they go on to another lap here. They go on to lap 33 very shortly to complete their 32nd lap. Approximately 2 to 3 more laps to go as they make their way around, and you can see Scott once again, he's got the speed here to try and look to the outside, but he's too far back to look for the move. And he's trying to perturb Wiggins. He's trying to get the Porsche driver to make a mistake here, but Wiggins does not do so. He keeps his head down. He continues to hold position as we ride on board the gearbox here of Wiggins versus Scott behind. Of course, we can see the differences in the behaviour of the cars. Wiggins goes a little bit deep there on the exit of 3. And as a result, this could be an opportunity for Scott. But this is where the Porsche shines. He's got that straight line acceleration out of the corners through the lower gears, particularly 2nd through to 4th, in order to stay ahead versus Scott, whose gearing is optimised more for the higher gears from what we gather. And as they make the way through turn number 5 right now, you can see that Wiggins holds on for the time being, but this is starting to get very on edge right now. And as they make the way up towards turn number 6 once again, if Scott can continue to stay this close, he's definitely going to be in with a shot in the near future of making the pass. But how long will it take as they make the way around? Meanwhile, I should tell you that with regards to Paul Walton, our driver who's in P5 right now, chasing after what is Lambert Wedder, it is the case that the gap between these two has been coming down gradually. Walton last lap will match Wedder for a lap time, but it's not coming down quickly enough. But meanwhile, talking about things that are coming down quickly enough, that gap between Scott and Wiggins coming down rapidly here as they make the way through the chicane once more. They will have one more lap after this. They are on the penultimate lap and the white flag will soon come out, and it will be Scott versus Wiggins one last time as they make the way around. This is the closest battle. We are going to stay with it to the finish now as they make the way through turn 12. They head down towards the start finish line to go on the final one, and Scott's already looking for the move. He's going much earlier this time. He's had a good run. Can he go all the way around the outside on the opening of the final lap? The white flag is waving, and as they come on through, it's Scott on the outside, it's Wiggins on the inside. Into turn 1 they go, into the left-hander, and Scott backs it off here. 9, there's no way through this time, but as they make the way through the left-hander, now can Scott come back at Wiggins, who goes a little bit deep there and has to collect the car on the exit of 1 to run through 2. No such time, but as they make the way up into turn number 3, you can see the back mark there of Mark Sykes, who's getting quite close to him. This could really work out for Wiggins right now. Sykes may give him a distant tow in the run through turn 7, and if that were to occur, that would neutralise Scott's advantage in terms of the slipstream and the straight line speed of that BMW M4 as they make the way up into turn 5. They come into the braking zone here. They're closing very rapidly to the back of Sykes. Now, will Sykes decide to move out the way and not interfere, or will he be up ahead and interfere unintentionally? That's the big question as they make the way into turn 6 right now. You can see Wiggins at this point really pushing on through right now. He knows that if he can get the toe of the driver in front, that's going to help him massively as they make the way up into the banking. Here they go then for the first major slipstream opportunity. And as they come charging around through turn 7 and down towards 8, you can see that Scott is closing little by little, but not enough this time. And this is what Wiggins needs as he gradually feels that distant toe of the air off the back of Sykes' car, punching a hole through the air for him. And as they come through into the chicane, we'll have to wait and see here how this plays out as they make the way on through. And as they come through the chicane, it does look as though Scott's had the better run this time. In fact, Scott's had a really good run through the chicane by comparison with Wiggins. And as they make the way on the final corner here, it's been brewing up to this sort of finale. Scott's going to look to go around the outside. Wiggins is going to make him go as high as possible here. The checkered flag is getting closer and closer and closer, and Scott's trying to find his way through. Scott's ahead. He's got his nose ahead. Wiggins on the lower bank, and as they come across the line, it is going to be Paul Scott who takes the win by the tiniest of margins, by 35 thousandths of a second over Wiggins. It'll be Dan Morey in the end who comes home in P3, 13 seconds back, and then it'll be Lambert Wedder who comes across the line in P4 as he makes his way on through. As he comes across the timeline, Paul Walton P5, recovering the into P5, and then it's going to be Nathan Scott who comes across the line in P6 when all is said and done here as he makes his way on around. Matthew Prout in P7 who drove well to get to P7 in the end. It'll be then Alistair Kirk who comes home in P8 when all is said and done, as he makes his way around through the final corner and up towards the timing line to complete his race, I should say. And then as he comes across it, Stefano Albanese who's going to come home in P9. But then look back here, ladies and gentlemen, it is Mark Baker who is going to be your winner in the AM class in the feature race, just keeping his head down and grinding out the result he wanted. Brilliant job from Mark Baker. Rick Jansen in P11. Then we've got Luke Hobson who's going to come home P12 overall. That is P2 in the AM class. He's on the lead lap lap right now, making his way through the final corner as he comes around to complete his race. A brilliant drive from Hobson as he comes across that line to take the checkered flag on the lead lap. And then we are going to have behind Hobson, it is Gareth Williams in what is P13. That is P11 in the Pro class as he comes on through in the BMW M4. And then it is going to be Michael Seal who completes our drivers on the lead lap, who comes home in P14. Michael Seal there doing everything right in terms of bringing the car home, but just not to be his day to get a solid result in the Pro class as he comes across that timeline in the number 57 car. What a brilliant race up and down the field. And right now, I think for Paul Scott, he's going to be thinking to himself, that couldn't have been closer than that. And he's probably looking across the car to Mark Sykes right now. And they probably both got their fingers up to say, one win apiece, guys. One win apiece. Both of them, of course, next-gen racing drivers. As we see Paul Scott just making his way down towards what is the start-finish line once again here, embracing it. And for Wiggins, what a heartbreak in the end. But there can only be one winner. And what about Mark Baker? We didn't see too much of him, but he just got on with the job at the end of the day and wasn't involved in any major incidents and made the racing work. Fantastic drive from Mark Baker. Great to see him make it to the top step. And hopefully we'll get to hear from him and Paul Scott very shortly as we get ready to have some post-race interviews for the feature race. Don't go anywhere, ladies and gentlemen. Give us 2 to 3 minutes and we'll bring you those post-race interviews as soon as possible. Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, what an absolutely thrilling conclusion to the feature race. You couldn't ask for it closer than that in the battle for the pro win and the overall win of the race. But in the end, Paul Scott just edging out his competitor, Wiggins, by the smallest of margins. And as I'm hearing From Paul Walton right now. Wiggins being heartbroken at the end of it, but fantastic races all the way through, and indeed building up to what is a fantastic season. But let's hear from Paul Scott himself about that win. Hello, Paul. Can you hear me?
Hi, mate.
Paul, a fantastic, thrilling finale to the feature race, all the way down to the line. How does it feel to have just pipped your rival to the post by the smallest of margins?
Yeah, that was really good. A bit lucky, but yeah, that was really intense. Sweating.
So I have to ask, going into the feature race, given that you started quite well towards the front of the grid, what was the strategy going into the feature? Were you expecting to just make the comfortable break at the start, or was there the concern that you'd sort of fall back towards the field as time went on?
I was quite unlucky in the sprint race. I got took out in the first lap. So I knew I was going to be starting quite high up in the feature race. I knew that the faster guys were going to be about 10 or 12 seconds behind me, but with the tow, as they did, they were going to catch me up. When I managed to get in front, I knew that I had nobody to work with, and yeah, it was just a matter of time, really. But it was difficult.
And then when you're saying about a matter of time, when it did come to that point where you saw that you had both Wiggins and Walton trying to close up to you, and Wiggins in particular staying with you throughout all of it, did your tactics change at that point? Did you think about, okay, how do I play this race to my advantage? Or was it one of those sorts of, I'll try and get the win if I can, but otherwise just see what happens?
I think Josh and Paul both had decent pace, probably a bit quicker than me, to be honest, but I think from racing a lot at Daytona, I just knew that my best chance would be coming out of the chicane. That was my absolute best chance.
And indeed, what a way to do it through the chicane coming to the end. And I do have to ask, as you were charging towards the finish line with the checkered flag waving, were you sort of edging the car forward in your seat as if to say, come on, just a little bit more?
I was, to be honest. At one point, I found myself. Josh did a good job because he sort of moved me to the right hand side, and then all of a sudden came back down the banking to the left, and I knew that it was going to get even closer. But at that point, I just wanted to make sure I didn't come back down and cause a collision. And yeah, luckily I was just ahead.
Oh, indeed, and what a close ending. And now looking ahead to round number 2 in a week's time, going off to Sebring. How do you feel for another American circuit, but a very different one?
It is very different. I've not got that much experience of that track, so I've got no idea what's going to happen with that.
Well, we look forward to seeing you in a week's time take on the challenge of a rather different circuit. But until then, congratulations on the win, and we look forward to seeing you in a week's time.
Cheers, mate. Thank you.
And from Paul Scott there, very happy with his performance and that thrilling ending, of course, sending it all the way down to the wire. And in the end, there could only be one winner, but a great amount of respect as well, shown towards his rival there of Wiggins coming to the end, and the way he's saying about Wiggins forcing him up on height and then coming down at the last moment. And indeed, I think a rivalry could be forming, but a great, respectful rivalry, and we look forward to seeing how that plays out. Now, in regards to trying to have a post-race interview with Mark Baker, we are just waiting to see if Mark is going to join us. I believe it may be the case that he may not be able to join us here, but we are just going to give it a couple of moments. Excuse me, and whilst we are waiting, one thing I should point out, by the way, which was not immediately obvious, and this is something which was raised towards, which has just been raised right now, with regards to Rinus van Hammeren, who was leading the AM race, and we didn't really talk too much about him in the end because we were so engrossed with the battle in the Pro Class. Rinus was on course to win the AM race in the feature, only to have a disconnection right at the end. On the last lap, he experienced a disconnection, so he had IT issues, and as a result was forced to retire from the race, having led for such a long time in the AM race, and that's so unfortunate. Of course, that can happen in motorsport, and we look forward to seeing Arenas come back, and I believe he is in the YouTube chat right now, and I do feel for you, good sir, but we look forward to seeing plenty more from you over the upcoming race. Indeed, great pace shown there, but of course these things do occur, and now if we're just waiting to see if Mark Baker is going to join us, we'll just give it another minute or so. I do think, ladies and gentlemen, Mark Baker may not be joining us in the end. So as a result, as we look to the chat once again, we can see the thumbs up from Venus there, Venus Van Hameren, to say that he's looking forward to things going ahead and that he's, well, excited for the prospects there and with plenty more racing to go. But with that, ladies and gentlemen, I think that does bring us to the conclusion in terms of tonight's racing. So with that, thank you very much for watching. And if you do want to know more about the Next Gen Racing community, why not check us out on our official Next Gen Racing website. That is nextgenracing.co.uk. Alternatively, our official Facebook group. That's Next Gen Racing on facebook.com/groups/Next Gen Racing. Also, a huge thank you to our partners without whom this would not be possible, for Lobby 2, and that is Coach Dave Academy and Next Level Racing. You can see their website URLs there. But now, whilst we wait to cool down for in a week's time, where we'll be taking to the Sebring Circuit in the United States, we carry on our tour of the United States of America, round number 2. And whilst the race does occur on Wednesday, the 24th of November, we'll be bringing you the post-race commentary for the racing on Thursday the 25th of November, and going forward I intend to be bringing you all of the racing action every Thursday. It had to be Friday this week due to a clash of circumstances, but it will be Thursdays going forward for Lobby 2. You won't want to miss it. Indeed, and as we saw yesterday, on Wednesday, and we'll see again right here and now, as brought to you by Reese Carroll, one of our Lobby 1 drivers, this circuit I see being a very different circuit and a very tight circuit, particularly once you get beyond the first few corners. But even the opening corner, as we're seeing right now, is a very sharp left-hand right-angle corner, which means there are plenty of overtaking opportunities with the wide circuit, but also plenty of opportunities for drivers to be caught out. And this one, very different from Daytona for the simple reason it won't be about the slipstream. It will instead be about the handling and the battles on the brakes. There will be some opportunities to attack on the straights. We've got some long straights, particularly towards the end of the lap. You've got a very long straight leading up to the final corner, which is a double apex, but we will have to wait and see how it is all going to play out, as right now we just count down the clock. Of course, you won't want to miss it, so be sure to come back in a week's time for some more fantastic racing action. But until then, I've been Paul Walsh, or TX141, or Britain a Spit, depending on what media you follow me on. We have been Next Gen Racing, and it's goodbye from us. We wish you all a fantastic weekend, and until next time, remember to stay safe, stay well, stay smiling, but most importantly, remember to stay on track. Good night.